Hello everyone, this is What If Fanfic and today I'll bring you what if Naruto created an organization. The link to the story will be in the description. If you want to hear a fanfiction, please comment down below. Now on to the story.
001. Beginnings 1 Beginning was 3 months into Naruto's training trip with Jiraiya. The Konoha spymaster received a pressing message from one of his spies in Tsuchi no Kuni. Naruto didn't know what it was about. The pervert refused to tell him why he was left to his own devices and more importantly without any training for 2 whole months, if everything went well. He didn't even know why Jiraiya refused to take him along, because the lazy pervert refused to cough up even that much. So he said Iwo was dangerous, sure, but how was it supposed to be more dangerous than Mizu no Kuni? They had already been there and that place was full of psychos. Naruto had had his reasons for this uncharitable opinion and it wasn't entirely because of poor Haku. During his first week in the country he had made a few shadow clones to help a fish merchant's cart up from the ravine it had fallen into. The merchant had offered him protection money and, when Naruto had refused, begged for his life, scared he had offended Naruto, and he kind of had, but any place where being nice to people got that kind of reaction had to be totally messed up in Naruto's opinion. And that had only been the beginning of it all. At least this is far from anywhere important. Even you can't make too much trouble here, Jiraiya said and ruffled Naruto's hair, making him huff in indignation and swat the hand away. Just so you know, that swamp village thing wasn't my fault. I don't care if they were high and mighty Kiri Chonin, nobody demands protection money from little flower girls. She was 10 years old for heaven's sake. He protested. Oh yes, that country had made an impression on him all right, just not the kind of impression Naruto would voice in polite company. But whatever Jiraiya was, polite company didn't enter into it. Those syphilic bastards of a plucked vulture and oyster with the shits, and they got their spines from the oyster and the vulture was a whore. If there was one plus side to the time he was forced to waste in every red light district they came across, it was that he didn't have to stoop to unimaginative 4-letter words. If you say so, Jiraiya managed to say, and Naruto was sure that the hitch in his voice was a swallowed laugh. That made the lecture about remaining inconspicuous that followed less than effective. Makimura was a beach town in the southern tea country. Jiraiya said he had to check in with his informants there, but Naruto was sure they were really there just because the only country T had land border with was fire and it was just about as far as they could get from rain and sound. He could read map just fine, thank you very much. Blessed by a sunny, temperate climate, Makimura attracted tourists from around the continent. It had long golden beaches, a nice seaside promenade with luxurious hotels, posh restaurants and expensive shops, a war monument to the dead of some historic civil war, several big shrines and of course a large red light district with geisha houses, tea houses, uncomplicated whorehouses, bars and casinos. It came as no surprise to Naruto that the safe house Jiraiya tucked him into was in the far corner of the red light district, huddled between the wall circling a geisha house's garden and the seashore. It was small, but reasonably nice looking. What, no back gate? He asked and gave the garden behind the high wall a knowing look. Jiraiya thwacked him over the head. Behave, you. There's food for a week stored inside, be mindful of the traps. Your cover's a worker for one of the local merchants, he's my contact. I'll send someone from Konoha to help you stay undercover and keep an eye on you. Jiraiya gave Naruto the merchant's contact information and the codes he would recognize his backup/babysitter from. He left Naruto to sort through the traps that had kept the house untouched in such neighborhood. It took Naruto half an hour to figure out how to get past the seal on the door. Inside he got scratched by one poisonous kunai and found himself hanging upside down from the ceiling. Kyubi took care of the poisoning, though it still turned his tongue purple and his urine blue. This was Naruto's first afternoon out in the big world on his own. And there was another beginning, the beginning before beginning, long before Naruto even became Jonin. The beginning Naruto didn't know had started anything. 002. Middle's another beginning was actually a middle, 2 Kirigakure graduation escapees on the run. Mizushima Konatsu was the eldest daughter of a prominent Kiri ninja family. Both her parents were jounin, likewise her uncles and aunts, and she was hailed as a prodigy. She excelled in kenjutsu and genjutsu, she was good at ninjutsu and taijutsu and she was passably good at information gathering. No one ever had any doubts that she would graduate. She was beautiful as well, her hair inky black and her eyes dove gray. She had money, she had 2 offers for her hand in marriage already, she was one of those people who had everything. Kaede was another story. He was a clanless, nameless orphan who had signed himself for ninja life after his mother's death because it was the only alternative to living on streets. He was a passable student, but didn't truly distinguish himself in anything, staying in the middle of the crowd by the skin of his teeth and thanks to Konatsu's tutoring. He was frequently bullied because of his feminine name, and his teachers didn't really expect him to survive. He only had one advantage: he was Konatsu's half-brother, and for all she wasn't supposed to care about the bastard son of her father, she did. She cared a whole lot. In Kirigakure, the graduating students were pitted against each other in one-on-one duels to the death, and so Konatsu and Kaede found themselves standing at the opposite ends of an empty room. Konatsu wondered if her father was the one who had arranged for this, for Konatsu to end the life of the son he never wanted and never acknowledged. The proctor was standing with his back to Konatsu, redundantly going through the rules, and even though Konatsu couldn't see his face, she thought the line of his shoulders and the tilt of his head spoke of pity as he watched Kaede. She couldn't afford pity, so she stabbed the Chonin from behind. They then went through his pockets for money, ransacked the academy kitchen for as much food as they could comfortably carry, and ran for their lives. Incredibly, they made it into a seaport and into the first ship that left it. It was headed to a tea country resort town. "We will be all right, I promise. I'll protect you. As long as we have each other, it's going to be just fine," Konatsu promised her brother and smiled, but she was simmering with frustration at her own impotence. It was a miracle they had made it that far, and she knew it. "I know," Kaede said and smiled nauseously. Part of it was the rolling, sickening way the ship bobbed up and down on the waves, but most of it was that he knew just how unlikely that was. But even one day of life was more life, and without Konatsu they would have put him into the cold ground of Kiri already. There was still life. As long as there was life, there was hope, and he hoped for a miracle. One miracle had already happened after all. 003. Ends. When Mizuki revealed himself to be a traitor, it was the beginning of one end. He had a lover, Ono Tsubaki, a kind, warm woman and a loyal kunoichi of Kanahagakure who found herself in a very difficult spot after his incarceration. The first stage was denial. There must have been some mistake, she thought. He could never. But he had, and she didn't know why. Was it for money? Had he grown that dissatisfied as an academy teacher? What it was that Orochimaru could offer and Konoha couldn't? What it was that was so much greater than life as a valuable Konoha shinobi, as her lover? Hadn't he cared any? Anger followed soon at denial's heels. Anger for abandoning her, for spitting at her love and trust, and for leaving her to deal with the consequences of his actions. For the first few weeks she became an outcast among her fellow villagers. She was tarred with the same brush as Mizuki, the one who had sold them out for whatever reason. It was a legitimate concern that they felt, she knew that much. He might have taken her into his confidences, she might have been an accomplice, a spy left active even when he had been caught. After all, she had been the one closest to him, the one most likely to notice something was amiss. Knowing this didn't make her feel any better. She was interrogated rigorously, and even after she was declared innocent there was a black mark on her record. It wasn't in any official papers, but in people's minds, and if she hadn't already made a jounin, she probably never would have. "I've been thinking, maybe that was why he turned the way he did. I mean, I'm well aware it isn't an excuse, but I just feel the need to understand even a little," she told Amino Iruka, Mizuki's one-time best friend and a comrade in this mess, even though Iruka was better off than she was. He had been the one to apprehend Mizuki after all. He was suspected when that missing nin killed his teammate with his kunai, and even though he was found innocent, the suspicion lingered about for years and blocked a lot of advancement prospects. That might well have been the start. And it's a reason, but you are right, it isn't an excuse. If we excused him because he was treated unfairly, we would do grave disservice to those who also suffer prejudice, but never lose their integrity, Iruka answered. They were eating ramen at Ichiraku's, and it didn't take a genius to know who Iruka was thinking of. The heat of the ramen broth burned on her tongue and shame burned in her mind. She hadn't ever treated Uzumaki Naruto cruelly, true, but then, she hadn't treated him in any other way either. She hadn't given him the benefit of doubt he shouldn't have even needed. It was only now, after his bravery during the Chunin exam invasion and his retrieval of the Godime Hokage, that people were beginning to see their Jinchuriki in a favorable light. Having tasted the same bitter medicine, Tsubaki wished she had offered the boy just one kind word, even once. She had learned the value of those the hard way. She had bargained with any higher power that might listen that everything was merely some terrible dream, or even enemy genjutsu, but she was even past that now. She was merely depressed. "Have you thought about a change of scenery?" Iruka asked her. He was looking at her worriedly, and she realized that her chopsticks had frozen halfway from the bowl to her mouth. She took a bite and chewed on the noodles, not really tasting them. "I hope you aren't suggesting I go missing," she jested, but it fell flat even in her own ears. "No, but I could give you 2-month-long C-rank mission in Tea Country, no hostilities expected. You could think of it as a paid holiday," he suggested. Tsubaki took the mission. She was sick of remembering training together with Mizuki, their nights together, The sweet words and kisses and the small, cruel things that occasionally slipped from his lips that seemed so obvious in hindsight. She was tired of looking at her friends with suspicion, wondering if Mizuki hadn't been the only one to harbor treachery in his heart. It was time to put an end to the chapter of her life named Mizuki, and 2 months of fresh air were just what she needed. 004. Inside, the safe house that had become Naruto's accommodation was in much better condition inside than the outside had led him to believe. It had been built traditionally, with a hallway that followed the edge of the house, a small kitchen with a stove and a very small oven, a bathroom, an all-purpose room that doubled as a living area, a bedroom, and a dining room, covered by tatami and sparsely furnished. There was a small table easy to carry to the side, a bookcase, a chest and a few pillows to sit on, and that was that. He found musty-smelling bedclothes from the chest. Everything was dusty and his steps left clear footprints on the mats. Once Naruto got through the traps, some of them were ingenious and he was so going to learn how to set them back up. The next thing in order was to search for dinner. He went to the kitchen and started rummaging through the cupboards. There wasn't a single packet of ramen in the house. What sort of a sucky safe house is this? He grumbled as he picked cans randomly from the shelves and read the labels. There were cans of green beans, leeks and sliced water chestnuts. There were cartons of applesauce with seals carefully painted on top to keep the sauce from going bad, and canned peaches in syrup. There was canned chicken and canned tuna and several jars full of spices, and from the far end of the lowest cupboard he found a carton that read Mama's Better Powdered Milk. Naruto had a feeling this food supply would survive a small-scale apocalypse. But no ramen. Note to self, go shopping tomorrow, he muttered as he took a can of beans and a can of tuna to make ninja hash, not looking forward to the shopping trip. The shopkeepers always charged him more than other people and the customers would glare. Actually, things had gotten better after he had brought Bakken back to the village, but that just meant that now he didn't know when he would get the cold shoulder treatment. But no one here knew anything about him. All they would know what he chose to tell them. Happy with this revelation, Naruto cooked his dinner and ate it. After this, there wasn't really anything to do with his day except prepare his futon, and a new problem came upon him. Boredom. Naruto and boredom. Back in Konoha and halfway through the Tea Country Prefecture, Iruka, Kakashi and Jiraiya felt a shiver go down their spine for no apparent reason. Naruto scoured the house for something to entertain himself with. There wasn't much except a deck of cards, and Naruto hadn't ever gotten through a single game of solitaire. The only person he lost to in cards was himself. He turned to the bookcase and looked what it had to offer. There were 2 Icha Ikas, one with a man and woman in the cover and the second with 2 women, but Naruto had completely lost all the naughty fun he had at first gotten out of doing something perverted when Jiraiya had made him a proofreader, and now he just didn't get what was so great about telling the same plot 100 times with different names. There were a few romance novels, one book about poetry that made Naruto's eyes cross when he tried to read it, and several ninja manuals. There was one about making simple seals, storage seals and similar, a few about weapon maintenance, something about art of war that also made Naruto's eyes cross, but the last looked promising. From cleaning supplies to warfare, how to prepare your own explosives, a training manual in Kyaku-jutsu. 10 minutes and Naruto was hooked. He had only learned that explosions were something that came from exploding tags, and the simple instructions the book was giving him opened a whole new world. 10 more minutes and he was rummaging through the cupboards again, this time in search of the mentioned supplies. There was a bottle of bleach in the bathroom and the kitchen had hot plates, but there were no enameled steel containers, so that was one more thing he needed to shop for. The second recipe needed ammonia and iodine crystals. There was ammoniac for cleaning the toilet, but Naruto didn't even know what iodine crystals were. He hoped they weren't terribly expensive. Then there was the thing with rust and some other powders he wasn't sure where to get to make touch explosives. Why don't they teach this at the academy? Doesn't seem too hard, he asked of no one, and looked at the pots and pans at hand. He hadn't expected much, but this was promising to become a learning experience after all. 005. Outside, once the morning dawned, Naruto left in search of ramen and employment. The merchant Jiraiya had sent Naruto to was named Matsuzaki Ariko. The old man glared at Naruto when he had laughed at the girly name and promptly laughed himself sick when Naruto gave his own name. "You are living in a hell of a big glass house, ramen topping," he bellowed and clutched his stomach. Now Naruto glared at him, even though he felt this was something Iruka-sensei would have said he deserved. "It's written with the kanji for maelstrom," he protested. The old man just leaned against the desk in his office and finally got his snickering under control. "Yeah, and mine's an herbal remedy," he said. He wore a stupid sunflower pattern yukata, and liked thwacking Naruto over the head with his cane. Naruto proceeded to sort him under the heading crazy old man in his mind, and they got along just fine after that. The job was paying, which was good because while Jiraiya had left Naruto traveling funds enough to last the 2 months, He had learned early in life that having a buffer never hurt. Their shop was located near the harbor, a good thing considering that the man sold all sorts of imported delicacies like coffee, chocolate, raisins and nuts, fresh fruits, cookies and cheese, and naturally all this was brought to him by ships. There had been a shipment just a few days before and the crates had been moved to a warehouse Matsuzaki had rented, and now they needed to be moved to the shop storage rooms. I can't afford to keep men on payroll so they can sit on their fat asses, so I hire them for this every time. How many you need? He asked and fanned himself with his account book. It was a hot day and promised to just get hotter. Hey, none. Just look at this, cage bunshine. There were small puffs of smoke and ebbing, chattering noises as the number of Narutos at Matsuzaki's Better Delicacies shop was raised from 1 to 10. And here I thought you were supposed to not let people know you were a shinobi, Matsuzaki drawled with a voice that could have beat out Suna for dryness. Naruto scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. I can get around that too, he promised and applied henge. Now there was one Naruto and 9 of his fellow Jinan. No girls because girls didn't really do the heavy lifting in the civies world and so he had to use Neji, Lee and this guy Genai from the Chunin exams, the one who chose not to complete the first phase so the rest of his team was disqualified, to buff the ranks. He felt kind of bad for making the clone look like that chicken, but not everyone could be a winner every time. And so Naruto and his clones got to work, ducking and darting and climbing and carrying crates between the warehouse and the shop. Kabuto flirted with Najitu to freak Naruto out, but as it turned out, freaking yourself out didn't really work. They had the same sense of humor after all. Everything went well until the very last crate of nuts, which Naruto carried with his own 2 hands. Some 50 feet into the busy hustle of the street, a man with a messy beard brushed past Naruto, hitting him hard with his shoulder and almost toppling him to the ditch. Watch where you're going, punk, the man grumbled on contact, glaring down at Naruto from an impressive height. His biceps looked like whole hams were trying to mate under his skin when he moved his arms. You're the one who pushed me, jerk, Naruto snapped back at the man, and then things happened really fast. The man moved to hit Naruto, and Naruto might just be a Jinan, but even a newly graduated academy student could have cleaned this guy's clock. Naruto didn't even bother doing anything fancy, just jabbed him hard in the stomach with the corner of the crate and marched on while the man was lying in the ditch, moaning. He was humming happily, and if people were staring at him, well, he was too used to that to even remember they weren't supposed to do that here. And being from a village with no organized crime whatsoever, he had never bothered to learn what that kind of tattoos and a missing middle finger meant. 006 hours. It was precisely 4 hours into his employment that Naruto became responsible for the shop. It happened like this. Matsuzaki was standing on old, rickety ladder to put new jars of fruit marmalade to the highest shelf when an old lady in posh, embroidered kimono walked in, and the lady was walking 2 little dogs with long, dirty white fur. The color was dirty white, that was, Naruto didn't think those dogs were ever allowed to get dirty, and he pitied them because forcing dogs to remain neat and clean all the time went against some inner dogness. He was crouching to put some crackers to the lowest shelf a bit behind the ladder, and the dogs run towards him. And the leashes of the dogs, which had been tied together so they could be easily held with one hand, were torn from the old woman's hand. One dog went from one side of the ladder and the other the other. The ladder fell and Naruto leapt to catch Matsuzaki, already congratulating himself for the quick save. But then Matsuzaki clutched his chest and his whole body jerked. Naruto wasn't a medic by any stretch of imagination. He could bandage wounds, of course, and set broken bones as long as the break was a clean one, and even do stitches as long the one being stitched didn't mind them being a bit ugly and uneven. But his poor chakra control had made learning medical jutsu an impossibility, and he hadn't ever shown any interest despite his one-time friendship with Kabuto, that rat bastard, either, to tell the truth. So he did the first thing he could think of and ran to the hospital, carrying Matsuzaki over his shoulder. Matsuzaki's life was saved, which was good, and the old lady even paid the hospital bill as the whole thing had been her fault, but that still left the problem of what to do about the shop. You must rest, Ariko Baka. You aren't as young as you used to be, and you could stand to lose some weight as well. It was only thanks to the speed your employee got you here that you survived it all, a nurse with white yukata and angular, stern face told Matsuzaki. The old man gave him a dark glare from where he was lying down. Look, you evil, old hag. He started, and the nurse promptly hit him over the head with her papers. Who are you calling old, you mummy? I'll have you knowing, I'll still be a spring chicken when you rest in your grave. She ranted, and Naruto tuned her out. They were obviously old friends, and the whole thing made him miss Sakura-chan a lot. Maybe he should write her, now that he was going to have an address she could write back to. That was a great idea. It was after a while that he noticed both the nurse and Matsuzaki turned to look at him speculatively. I could go to my niece, but can you take care of the shop? Matsuzaki asked him. Naruto gave him a winsome smile. I worked for a lot of shops back home, he said. He didn't say it was about D ranks because he didn't know if this nurse, Sakuya, was trustworthy, but Matsuzaki should know anyway, and he looked reassured. You can leave your foolish employer to me. I'm his niece's neighbor, I'll see to it that he gets plenty of rest, Sakuya promised and ruffled Matsuzaki's hair. Matsuzaki made an offended noise deep in his throat, but he looked kind of happy anyway. I'll do very good job, I promise, Naruto said. He hadn't ever been responsible of a whole shop alone, but he had been behind the counter and he could do accounting. He had done his own finances since he was 10 after all. So that left carrying things and protecting the place from robbers and stuff, and he could use those seals and traps that had been in the safe house before he went in. No criminal was getting in on his watch. 007. Days that evening Naruto set the traps and drew the seal carefully. He didn't really know why they worked as they did, but no knowledge of that was required as long as you weren't trying to create a new seal, being able to perfectly accurately, and the word perfectly couldn't be stressed too much, recreate what you had already been shown was enough. The next day he went to the shop early to sweep a bit only to find 5 thugs lying unconscious by the back door and the small window next to it. He didn't even bother with taking them to the police, but simply heaved them off to a stripe of wasteland overgrown with weeds between one street and another and was done with it. He then opened the shop for the day. And he found that wasn't the end of it. It begun just before Naruto closed the shop for a lunch break. The shop even had this cute little sign with a panda with a speech bubble, and he was just waiting for the 2 housewives and their children, a cute little girl with pigtails and a boy Naruto was sure was hiding a frog in his pocket, to leave. Then 2 men walked inside. One of them he recognized as the burly man from the day before and he sighed. Why did people have to be so bad losers anyway? They were like Sasuke team. The other was a little shorter and a little heavier than the first, but they looked very similar. They even dressed alike and they had the same tattoos, and Naruto wondered if they were maybe brothers. But they were both missing a middle finger, and that was kind of a really funny coincidence. Now you are gonna get it, punk, the idiot from the day before growled. He was crackling his knuckles, but the effort just ended up looking funny because of the missing finger, and Naruto smirked. But his smile froze when the women flattened themselves against the wall and the little girl began to cry. The idiot number 2 snorted, mistaking his reaction for fear. And a woman too. He started and leered at the women, but he never got any further. Because if there was something Naruto hated even more than inconsiderate bastards who run away to play sensei and student with evil maniacs who invaded Konoha, the evil maniacs themselves and the evil maniacs' evil, backstabbing medic nins, it was people who bullied innocent civilian women and kids. The 2 men went down easily. 1 punch for each of them was all that was needed. It was a strange scene after that. The women in their expensive, pink kimonos were watching him with eyes as round and wide as plates, and the little girl stopped crying. Naruto flashed them a smile and made a peace sign. The little boy looked at him with hero worship in his eyes, and Naruto felt his heart swelling with some warm, funny, stupid happy feeling. I have a frog, the boy volunteered and stepped forth, taking the small amphibian from his pocket. His mother grabbed his arm and pulled him back, giving Naruto a startled look and stammering apologies. Frogs are awesome, Naruto agreed and kept his eyes on the boy so he didn't have to look at the woman. It shouldn't hurt so much, but it still did, though the boy's grin made it a little better. Even the little girl smiled and giggled a bit, and Naruto gave her a candied apple, and then another to the boy so he wouldn't feel bad. The women made their purchases quickly and left, but that wasn't the end of it either. When it was time to close the shop for the night, yet another thug approached Naruto when he made a shortcut through a small, dark alley. It was a huge, bulky man with a missing tooth and again that missing finger, and now Naruto was sure. Once was happenstance and twice was circumstance, but 3 times was a pattern already, like Kakashi-sensei always said. The third man didn't give any more resistance than the first 2 had either, but it was then, of course, that 3 women in revealing clothes walked past the alley, and one of them happened to look there. She shouted in fright. They all stopped dead in their tracks. They stared at the man on the ground and Naruto standing above him, perfectly unharmed and rubbing his head in a sheepish way. This isn't what it looks like, he offered and tried to look harmless. Predictably, their reaction was to scream and run in the other direction for dear life. Naruto drooped. What a lousy day this has been, he grumbled. 008. Weeks Makimura was a nice little town, Tsubaki decided when she walked the streets towards the safe house Jiraiya-sama had given her directions to. It was early morning and the chirping of birds drowned out the squeaking and rumbling of what few merchant charts made when they were rolled to their allotted plots for the day. She watched at the sea that glittered in the early morning sun and thought that maybe she would buy herself a swimsuit. This was shaping up to be a better and better idea by the minute. A paid holiday like Iruka had said. Her only duty was to ensure that Uzumaki Naruto didn't do anything stupid and grandiose enough to attract shinobi attention. The boy's rambunctious nature aside, this was a country without a hidden village or any real political significance. This was the kind of place spies were assigned to as a punishment for messing up somewhere important. What could possibly go wrong? This was a question Ono Tsubaki regretted asking herself when she realized her charge was in the middle of a small-scale war with the local Yakuza. What you think you are doing, Uzumaki? You were supposed to keep low profile, do I need to explain you what that means? And who is she? She demanded answers from the brat sitting in the middle of the safe house's floor, bandaging the leg of a young woman. She was beautiful enough in that comfortable way that didn't leave anyone feeling intimidated, with brown hair and dark, pretty eyes and round face. It was not the moment to get interested in the opposite gender. In fact, she was beginning to wonder how he had survived to this age at all, let alone become a genin. She's Miwa-chan, those thugs were beating her up. Naruto begun his explanation, but the girl laid a hand on his arm and looked Tsubaki to the eye. The sudden fierceness in the mousy girl's demeanor was surprising. They were going to rape me, the girl named Miwa said quietly. I'm a prostitute, I work for the Yakuza. They take most of the money I earn and they take me whenever they feel like it. Naruto-kun killed those men. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the intensity of it carried through and so did the grim satisfaction. Naruto looked at his hands like he had never seen them before and Tsubaki realized with a sudden start that it had been the boy's first kills. But the shadows were chased away and Naruto's eyes hardened. No one who does that to other people deserves to live. Don't worry, Miwa-chan, you won't ever be going back to those people, he vowed. Many thoughts were chasing one another around in Tsubaki's head. The incredulous he was fighting Yakuza without killing them. What did he do? Arrest them was shoved away by the wistful that girl loves him and he has no idea. But what surfaced first was, you will see that many people do so and live to do it again. The lecture was even part of the academy curriculum. Ninja sex ed covered the run-of-the-mill contraception, diseases and health risks associated with underage pregnancy, but also rape as interrogation tactics and prostitution as a part of infiltration tactics. This was the kind of world they lived in. Well, I'm gonna change that because I'm not gonna change, believe it, Naruto exclaimed and hit the air with a closed fist. It made Tsubaki sad for someone other than herself, because some things could be changed by no one. But Naruto could save Miwa if Tsubaki let him, he was the kind of person who would. She remembered the cruel whispers that had always followed the boy, demon brat gritted between teeth, and he remembered the man who had lain with her under false pretense and how Naruto had been the one to catch him. It hadn't been rape, she had said yes every time and enjoyed it, but she felt violated all the same. And she had been suspected and blamed, considered dirty, like many would consider whores dirty. Some would claim even in Konoha that it didn't count if you raped a prostitute. No one who does that to other people deserves to live. I was Mizuki's lover, did you know that? She asked. Naruto looked kind of squicked out, but also gentle? Kind? She wasn't certain she was reading him right. That must have sucked. I bet he was a bad kisser too, he said and startled a laugh out of Tsubaki. She wasn't a violent person by nature, her career choice notwithstanding, and she was a bit shocked to notice her knuckles were turning white. She purposefully opened her fists. Those Yakuza are lucky, Naruto-kun, she mused and looked out of the window, feeling loose-jointed and drunk. Mizuki had struck a fracture into her and she wasn't sure if Naruto-kun had just fixed it or struck her to pieces once and for all, but whatever the case, she had forgotten what it was to feel this good. Outside the sun had finally risen over the roofs. This will be a beautiful day to die. It had taken Seihara Hiro, the unquestioned leader of Makimura's dirty underbelly, years to build his criminal empire. It was destroyed in a week. And if Naruto dropped them off to the police and Tsubaki vented her frustration, he didn't seem to hold it against her. She was clever enough to never be caught anyway. 009 months' time is a tricky thing, subject to perception. Sometimes days and weeks will fly away like hours and days, brief, fleeting moments. Sometimes even minutes can stretch into eternity, like Naruto could assert from his experiences from the academy. 2 months isn't that long time, objectively speaking. Matsuzaki Eriko would attest that it took him barely any time at all to realize that the goofy, friendly facade that Kid Jiraiya-sama had left with him presented was entirely false. The chief of police would claim that those were the longest 2 months of his life and he never received so many gray hair because of one person before, while the prostitutes who at first meekly crept in to meet the new management would say their Naruto-kun left all too soon. They were, after all, very soon former prostitutes. Even the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Naruto's journey begun when 2 missing nin from Kiri stepped off the deck of a merchant ship, looking for employ and a place to hide. 010. Years the rumors were all over the place. Konatsu and Kaede didn't even need to go searching for them. The word was that the entire criminal world was in wild disarray, that old man Seihara had been dethroned and all his men were either dead or in prison, and that, this was whispered with exited, worried, awed tone, it had been real ninja who did it. They were sitting in a Dengo diner and slowly eating their lunch, but in truth more interested in what the small group of men sitting next to them had to say. I heard that Matsuzaki-san is involved somehow in this affair. Who would have thought? He was always so respectable, person one spoke with obvious relish. He had red hair, mole in the left cheek and distinctive Adam's apple. I hear the new boss is so young he doesn't even shave yet, that blonde kid, remember, said person two, brown hair, brown eyes, buck teeth. There are two of them, they are identical twins. I saw them in the docks yesterday. But I don't think they are really ninja, I mean, they didn't have those bandanas with the metal plate, whatever they were called again, said person 3 aka the good-looking one. And what normal people run over rooftops? Person 2 asked with a dry voice and took a gulp from his sake jar. Konatsu and Kaede shared a look and finished their meal, leaving the diner. So, a missing nin organization has taken over. Do you think they recruit? Kaede asked, trying to hide his trepidation. He wasn't the most squeamish person there was, no one in Kirigakure stayed squeamish for long, but some of the rumors about the sort of missions missing nin got involved in, starting with assassinating little babies and getting steadily worse from there, really gave him the creeps. But Konatsu's eyes were shining. If they have only just taken over, there must be much work to do. I'm sure I can get us in, and then we'll have safety in numbers, she said, gratified. Mizushima, Konatsu and Kaede had their expectations about how the world worked in general and the ninja world in particular. Those had been built upon years and years of ruthless training and eyeing their classmates with cold, and in Kaede's case, uneasy, eyes, knowing only half of them would survive. Years and years of watching little kids beg for food until they barely even noticed it, by yearly death patrols to weed out all Kekkei Genkai users and good, unselfish people like priests and volunteer workers at homeless shelters found mugged and sometimes dead had left them with firm opinion that you could trust only your family and oftentimes not even all of them. Then they walked into Matsuzaki's Better Delicacies shop and the blonde, grinning boy behind the counter made that certainty crumble. 011. Read to say that Tsubaki was less than charmed when Naruto-kun returned to the safe house with two missing nin in tow was an underestimation. Missing nin were generally speaking scum, the ones who couldn't keep their violence aimed towards acceptable targets or the ones who sold their loyalty. Kirigakure was a case of its own, as about half of the people who left that place were merely political dissidents or victims of severe abuse of authority, but they were desperate and all too willing to do what it took to survive, even kill people who had considered them to be their allies. The heart of the average Kiri missing nin was dead 7 times over before they left the borders of their country. So this isn't a missing nin operation? The one who had introduced herself as Natsu asked. Tsubaki was very sure that wasn't her real name, but she answered to it easily enough that it must be an old alias, or a nickname. Konoha has interest in Tea Country? I bet half of my graduating class couldn't tell Tea Country from the map. No, I was just dumped here until my sensei gets the important stuff done, Naruto-kun answered, displaying unusually good sense in not giving his sensei's name to these people. He wasn't lying about Konoha's general disinterest in Tea Country either, though he exaggerated a bit. They learned about the Big Five in history classes in detail and C ranks covered their smaller border neighbor quickly enough, but Tea Country was stable and peaceful and prosperous, not the sort of place that created many opportunities for ninja, in other words. Ah, I fear we have been followed, or we will be in short time, the boy who trotted after the girl like a faithful puppy said. His name was allegedly Katsu, but he was more visibly uneasy with it than the girl with hers. Speaking of the girl, she glared him a little, but he raised his chin, defiant, and the girl hid a sigh. So he had more morals and the girl was resigned to it, reluctantly accepting. This bit of information could be of use. Can't be worse than Gato or Zabuza or that Dodukaza on a creep that bothered Yuki Haim. Naruto-kun waved his hand. Tsubaki paused to consider that Naruto-kun had contributed to the fall of 2 tyrannical regimes before he had even made it Chonin, but before she could be properly bewildered the girl called Natsu put her teacup to the table with a loud clink. So that's where I had heard your name before. They named the great Naruto bridge after you, she said, and the boy called Katsu looked at him with admiring eyes. Natsu seemed to be considering something and then things just clicked for Tsubaki. She hadn't even expected Naruto-kun to be able to protect them, not after actually meeting with him. She could tell he was inexperienced and she probably believed Tsubaki to be merely a chonin since she followed Naruto-kun's lead in this, protesting notwithstanding. She wasn't precisely trying to make her objections stick, and Natsu had intended to use the two of them as a distraction against anyone who might have followed her and her brother and escape while the dust was still settling. It wasn't a bad plan, but it made Tsubaki see red. That someone would use Naruto-kun like that. She only realized she was releasing a good deal of killing intent when both Natsu and Katsu turned to her, their hands at their weapons. Tsubaki took a deep breath and forced the red across his vision wash away. All is well, she told Naruto-kun and managed to smile. Many would have found it more than a little sad that she was taking her clues from a Genin, and Genin such as Uzumaki Naruto, but Tsubaki had made her decision when she first bared her blade and she wasn't the type to change her mind according to every rouge blast of the wind. She would wait and see where this unique nindo of Naruto-kun would take them. And if these two thought her to be Chonin rather than Jounin, well, the easier it would be for her to kill them. Tsubaki was willing to give this alliance a chance, but she had sworn to be nobody's fool ever again. 012. Orange Miwa had been a geisha student once. Her father had sold her to a geisha house when she was 5 years old and she had worked her way up there from a servant girl to a student and even an apprentice geisha, Maiko. It was simply her bad luck that the geisha district her geisha house had been an illegal one. The unlicensed districts were the most popular. There was less standing in ceremony and more fun. Often a man couldn't find enough room to sit on the floor of a tea house, this was how popular they were. But while a girl could earn well there, she also had to live in fear that the authorities may decide to close the unlicensed district and then she will have to find herself a new geisha house. This was the draw of luck, they did and Miwa couldn't. If she had already been a full-fledged geisha she probably could have found a place that would have taken her in, but no one had needed an extra Maiko and she had to become a prostitute, make clouds and rain with any man who would pay for her. She wasn't the only girl in this predicament either, her best friends Aiko and Yuriko were thrown out with her. It was harsh life and she didn't expect to live long. Some disease would surely take her soon, if she didn't starve once whoring cost her good looks or somebody didn't kill her. Then Naruto came and everything changed. He killed the men who tried to rape her and took her to his house, caring for her. He and the older woman, Tsubaki, took over Makimura from the horrid man who had claimed the city as his turf and suddenly she found she wasn't a whore anymore. We could convert it into an inn and a bar, Naruto-kun said as he eyed the house critically. You can sing and play something, right? Since you used to be a geisha, he asked and Miwa couldn't find it in her to remind him again that she hadn't quite been one yet. It wasn't as if Naruto-kun cared. He simply found her cool. Aiko and Yuriko were as well, they can sing and dance there. I would like to help you personally, if you don't mind, she proposed and blushed, hoping she wasn't too forward. She so wished to become part of his life. Naruto-kun was a ninja. The mere thought made chill go up and down Miwa's back. The shinobi were the stories of her childhood and the rumors important men would whisper to each other while you filled their glasses. Whispers of assassinations and kidnappings, beautiful, seductive women who could wring every secret out of a man and then leave him hanging, sometimes literally, men with so terrible jutsu they could kill whole armies. Miwa had always feared ninja. She even feared Tsubaki-san a little bit. She never would have thought she would ask to become a secretary/assistant/anything to a shadow killer. But Naruto-kun was kind and sunny. He didn't even dress like a shinobi, but wore bright orange and blue that clashed with it in a particularly eye-catching way. Naruto-kun was her new hero, just as orange was her new favorite color. 013. Yellow Makimura had recently turned into a right battlefield. There was a boy who was said to be a shinobi of some sort, that mere word was enough to send shivers down even a brave man's spine, and a woman no one had seen up close, a kunoichi and maybe his lover as well, though that rumor made the chief of police feel something akin to pity for the boy. But it isn't an excuse. If I excuse one who does terrible things because he is used, I offer insult to those who suffer the same, yet don't turn to crime. There was a boy, there was a woman and then there was a criminal empire in ruin, Yakuza in custody, Yakuza missing and several Yakuza corpses, not to mention a very suspicious testament, but most infuriatingly no proof whatsoever that these people had killed anyone. But now the violence seemed to be over, it was a beautiful day and the chief of police hadn't spent a waking moment with his wife for 3 days. Today was his day off, come hell or high water, ninja invasion or a plague of locusts. Good. Grunted Yamamoto Takumo, smiling down at the letter he'd been reading. He was sitting on bench in a park next to a Shinto temple, under the shade of cherry trees. Good what? Asked Reiko, looking up from the little princess she was holding in her arms. Ruko was 3 months old and the apple of their eye. For the longest time Reiko had trouble getting pregnant and they had almost given up hope. My cousin Ichiro has finally decided to propose to Hamasaki Kiku. He plans to ask her to marry him next week at the Mermaid Festival at the Seashore Palace. Seashore Palace was the finest, and most expensive, restaurant in Makimura. Takumo couldn't even imagine how Ichiro had managed to get a reservation for that day. Reiko grinned at him. Then shall we gather chrysanthemums, dearest, for their table at the festival to help Ichiro gather his chrysanthemum? She asked coyly. It was a beautiful day, golden with sunshine and peaceful. Of course it had to come to an end. There was the sound of a girl crying and Takumo turned his head to look. He saw a girl in yellow yukata, standing under red torii gate, gazing up and tears streaming down her cheeks. A cat had climbed to the lower lintel of the gate and meowed there, obviously afraid to climb down. The girl was tugging the orange sleeve of a young boy and Takumo thought his heart would stop. The boy had bright yellow hair. The dominant hair color of people of tea country was black. Some had dark brown hair, or even light brown, but yellow was exotic, strange. Even in a tourist city like Makimura, blondes were a rare sight. He couldn't see the face, but the girl tugged again and Takumo stood up, alarmed, hoping Sato had the sense too. The boy known as Sato Naruto walked up the beam of the gate like it was flat ground and not in fact at 90-degree angle to the ground. He quickly picked up the cat and jumped down with a somersault that would have left Takumo with a twisted ankle or possibly even broken neck like it was nothing and handed the cat to the girl. She shouted in delight and pressed the scruffy black thing to her chest and Sato ruffled her hair, smiling beatifically. Takumo felt his insides twist. The ones who make a show of being affable are always the worst, his shisho had told him once. It takes a certain kind of man to murder in cold blood, but the kind that murder in cold blood and then hold charity auction, make nice with cute kids and save kittens is worse. They have something loose in here. He had twirled his finger at his temple. Takumo couldn't remember a single instance his shisho had been wrong. 014. Green. When Morino Adate heard that Makimura had been overrun by 2 missing nins, his first inclination was to bang his head against something hard. Adate didn't like the ninja world even at its best. Once his heart was gnawed by the green eyes beast called envy, but Naruto had helped him regain some of his lost self-respect in winning the annual race, and a few kind words from his brother. Dash had given him the rest of it. And even when looked at objectively, life was just that much better when he didn't have to pit himself against tests engineered to make the majority of the attendants fail and be used by someone who would use him to do their dirty job and throw him away like trash later. Alright, maybe he was still just a little bit bitter. Adate had waited with bated breath after Ibiki had taken Team 7 back to Konoha, but when no one appeared even after months to demand that he join Konoha again, he had allowed himself to relax. Some say that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, but the fact was that Adate had walked both sides of it and he preferred his civilian life. Ibiki should have changed his status from Kia to MIA at the very least. He hadn't, and Adate was eternally grateful for that, but now it seemed that trouble had found its way to the peaceful tea country after all. It was after a day of careful consideration that he approached Wasabi Jirocho, the man who had taken him in from the ditch and treated him as his own son. Wasabi Jirocho was a big man. He had a bit rough-hued but kind face that seemed to proclaim that like a mountain, he was here to stay and couldn't be moved. He was sitting behind his desk and sipping tea from a delicate china cup that almost completely disappeared into his big hands. His simple gray kimono and his austere room void of all unnecessary cluttering were like his own reflections. He wasn't a man fooled by vain gilding or cheap glittering. He smiled to Adate when he came in and like always it made him feel like a little better person than he was. Father, I'm sure you have heard the rumors from Makimura as well? He begun, and when Jirocho nodded he continued, with your permission I would go there and see how much truth there is to them. Why bother? Makimura is far from here? Jirocho asked, but Adate got the feeling that he wasn't necessarily disapproving, but simply curious. I know how these things progress. If Makimura becomes a center of missing nin action, it will invite hunter nins, and hunter nins in turn will invite spies. And before we know it, this isn't just the problem of one town, it will spread slowly but surely over the whole country. Tea country was a gentle land of lush rice fields and fertile orchards, harbor cities that bustled with life, and smaller, idyllic country towns. It was not perfect, certainly, but what place was? If some missing nin thought they could drag tea country down to their level, well, they had another thing coming. But what could you do? You left that life behind a long time ago, and I know you have only practiced running. Jirocho didn't look happy, but he hadn't said no either. I'll just ascertain that it's true and not just another tall tale about Yakuza turf war. If it's true, then I'll make a risk assessment and we will know how much help we need to request from Konoha. Maybe if they were lucky they would get Naruto's team again. Naruto was a bit of a loudmouth, but he had a good heart. Actually, Adate was a bit worried about him. So pure heart in a hidden village was just begging for trouble. You would call for Konoha? Jirocho asked with a mild voice, peering at Adate over the rim of his cup. They had not talked about Ibiki and how he was alive, how it influenced Adate's view of the shinobi world for quite some while. This conversation had been coming. I'm not happy to deal with them, It answered honestly. But now the situation is still salvageable. Better a team from Konoha now that the countryside overrun by foreign agent the next year. I'm not going to leave you for them, he didn't say out loud. I just want to protect our home. Jirocho smiled to him and set down his teacup with a clink. Packed his rucksack and put on his weights. As far as shinobi went he was a bit green, but he could do reconnaissance as well as anyone. Naruto had shown him that you had to fight for what was yours and that was ninja way even a date could get behind. 015. Blue Naruto was busy rearranging the Yakuza business. Tsubaki-chan had given him a name for the crazy missing finger people, so the girls could earn their living honestly when the first man walked in. Miwa-chan had promoted herself to his personal assistant and was doing the actual job behind the counter while Naruto sat on a stool by the chocolate aisle and went over the books Konatsu-chan had stolen for him. Naruto was very good at math. This wasn't because of any natural aptitude, but thanks to several obstructive, petty Konohan bureaucrats who had made it necessary for him to pinch every penny while growing up. The casino boat, the loot from Seihara's safe house and the bordellos that he would turn into inns with said loot could easily make a man rich, but becoming rich wasn't his goal there. Employing all the girls was, and right now there were still 24 he couldn't find anywhere to put. But Miwa-chan trusted him. He couldn't let her down. Excuse me, Sato-sama? The man he had at first taken for a customer asked as he slowly dithered closer to Naruto. He was a middle-aged, plump man, dressed very smartly. In his hand there was a brown envelope. I am, Naruto admitted cheerily. People didn't call him Sama every day, or ever, really. Jiraiya had picked Sato Naruto for his name because Sato was the most common surname in Tea Country, and because he didn't trust Naruto to remember to introduce himself with fake first name. He would have remembered, really. But Naruto was a kick-ass name and he didn't want to lose it even for a short while. That was his story and he was sticking to it. I came to, greet and congratulate you for your, quick promotion to your current position. And also, I think we can reach an arrangement? So that everything will go smoothly? The man stumbled over his words. He didn't sound terribly sure of himself. Who are you and what sort of arrangement are you speaking about? Naruto asked and closed his account books. Maybe the man was Matsuzaki's customer and wanted to make a big order? He didn't know what other promotion the man could be referring to. I am Suzuki Eiji, the owner of the Billow and Wind, a restaurant by the promenade. I trust that if I, pay for protection I'll have no need to worry over, unfortunate fire-related accidents. The man thrust the envelope to Naruto's hands and backed away a few steps, looking at him expectantly. Naruto might have asked about the way he looked at him, hopeful and nervous at the same time, but this was when he was hit by an epiphany. Konoha, like all ninja villages, had a very effective fire brigade. It was necessary when fire jutsu and different kinds of explosions were part of the trade for a good portion of the villagers. He had already learned during the short while he had traveled with Jiraiya sensei that this wasn't so in the civilian settlements. In small villages and towns whatever police force the place had covered firefighting also, and in big cities the responsibility was given to one of the samurai families, and the way they handled their duty varied from place to place, but one thing all these makeshift fire brigades had in common: no water jutsu and pretty bad mobility and reach, what with the need to haul huge water tanks by carriage or the need to make bucket chains from the nearest well. Makimura was undoubtedly the same. He could find a fire brigade. This man was willing to pay him for it. He could use the pay and part of the Yakuza treasure to make some sort of fund for the girls' wages. He would have to check the local laws, but he was pretty certain he could make it tax deductible. Konatsu-chan and Kaede could become the overseers and trainers, and the water jutsu would be good for self-defense too. This was a great idea. He congratulated himself. The pale man, Suzuki, nodded and backed out of the shop. Over the course of the day 17 public-minded citizens chipped into the fire brigade fund, and Naruto had a great time designing the really cool uniform with Miwa-chan. It was blue because obviously firefighters dressed in blue, tight so it wouldn't get caught anywhere, and covering so it would protect the skin. Do you think midnight blue or navy blue would look best? Or maybe dark blue or even ultramarine? Miwa-chan pondered and tapped her chin with the pencil. There is a difference? Naruto asked and rubbed his head. This had to be one of those girl things. 016. Purple. The end of Naruto's 10th day in Makimura, after the obligatory shopkeeping and the much preferred fire brigade planning, saw Naruto dabbling with explosives. Miwa-chan was his faithful assistant as always, and Tsubaki-chan was hovering in the background, making sure he didn't accidentally blow the safe house up. His guide in all things that go flash and bang in the night? The totally awesome From Cleaning Supplies to Warfare, How to Prepare Your Own Explosives, a training manual in Kyaku Jutsu. Kayakujutsu, the art of gunpowder, had become a little old-fashioned since the explosive seals had become so common and many scoffed at it as quaint and cute. But Naruto had made do his whole life with what he could scrape together from the teaching his sensei deigned to offer him. In the academy Iruka sensei had been fair at least, but Naruto had been only one of his students and admittedly a bit more maintenance than the poor teacher's time had allowed. Besides, there were many places that would confiscate any seals they found on a person, but who would bother to confiscate bleach and hot plates? Let's start easy with the eggshell smoke bombs. He proposed, rummaging through the cold cabinet. The safe house didn't have anything as modern as a fridge, but it had a cold cabinet where ice would be stored in the middle of an insulating seal array. It would take a week or so before the ice had melted enough more needed to be bought and it kept the perishable food fresh. From there Naruto picked a dozen of eggs. Let's see, we'll need sugar, fertilizer with saltpeter and a few other ingredients for this one, Miwa-chan said as she leafed through the book. Also, cotton wool, aluminum foil and a pan. We'll be ready in no time at all. Why you bother to make bombs this day and age? Konatsu-chan asked and Naruto wasn't sure if she sounded curious or doubting. Most of his practically all-female enterprise, he and Kaede the only exceptions so far, plus Ariko who didn't count because he was Naruto's boss, lived in the ex-whorehouse dorms, but Tsubaki-chan had demanded that Konatsu and Kaede remain under her watchful eye and Naruto didn't see why not. Besides, Tsubaki-chan was great and she probably had a good reason. Because many places check you for seals, but no one cares about eggs and fertilizer. I'm Konoha's #1 surprising ninja and proud of it. He cheered and Konatsu-chan made a small aha noise deep in her throat. After this they got to work. Miwa-chan caramelized the sugar and Tsubaki-chan insisted in being the one who distilled the saltpeter out of the fertilizer because apparently just pouring the thing into the sugar as it was would have been a bad idea. Naruto was the one who mixed that with the rest of the ingredients and put the end product, a sort of thick paste, onto the folio to dry while Kaede made himself useful by pricking a small hole into the egg shells and sucking them carefully dry. It was apparently something he used to do a lot as a kid for some strange reason and he had learned to like the taste. After this the dry paste was powdered and poured into the eggs with a thin straw, after which a string was added for a fuse and the hole was sealed with cotton wool. In the end the kitchen counter was full of various pans, glass jars and spoons, plus a Primus stove, and they had 12 innocuous-looking eggs sitting in their cartoon. Now we try this out, Naruto decided. He carried one egg outside and they all were watching with various states of interest as he carefully lit the short fuse and jumped back just before the fragile eggshell exploded. There was smoke. Surprisingly lot of smoke in fact, considering how small the egg had been. The book had said that the more sugar, the more smoke and Miwa-chan had to have been generous with it. The egg bomb filled the darkening front yard with a mushroom pillar of pale purple cloud. Miwa-chan was coughing and Konatsu-chan nodded appreciatively. Not bad. You can buy sugar and fertilizer everywhere. Now her voice was somehow sly like it slithered its way inside the ear, but the grin that slowly broke out reminded him of Sakura-chan when she was feeling evil in the best possible way. This would be even cooler if we used something bigger than an egg, like a hollowed pumpkin. But why is it purple? Naruto asked. The book had said that the smoke was supposed to be white. I guess that's from some chemical residue from something in the fertilizer, Tsubaki-chan speculated. And the next time we can do something that really explodes. Naruto jumped up and down with anticipation. All in all it had been a good evening. 017. Brown afterwards Morino Adate thought that he should have guessed the moment he heard the name Naruto. Granted, these people called him Sato, but how many people in the world would saddle their child with a name like Naruto? A name like that simply begged to be spelled with the wrong kanji. Nevertheless, he didn't make the connection as he circumspectly eavesdropped on a man in the local police's blue uniform conversing with a man in rough spun brown clothes in a small harbor bar. It was a rough place for rough people, but Adate hadn't yet forgotten his lessons in how to fit in. I saw him at distance once, a pretty short guy, but he beat those thugs up like it was nothing. I heard that cream as chocolate Chandler Matsuzaki's involved. Who would have thought? He was supposed to be so respectable, the unshaved man spoke with obvious relish. Adate leaned back a bit, sipping from his mug and sighing, pretending to relax. The bar was a pretty miserable place, a watering hole with tables darkened with age and walls darkened with smoke from the train oil lanterns and no windows. It was like the color brown had decided to launch an attack to suck all joy out of the world. It was the sort of place where all drunks were either sad or angry. Did you see him kill any of those thugs? The police officer asked with a hopeful voice. Adate saw from the corner of his eye how the man shook his head. Nah, I ran like hell. Saw one of them the next day, with a bruise the size of a soup bowl on his cheek. He grunted and downed his mug of ale. This short exchange was enough to lead Idate to Matsuzaki's better delicacies shop, where the girl at the counter, a cute one with pretty brown hair and pleasant face but stern eyes, gave him an answer to a question he hadn't even asked, much to his embarrassment. Walk down the Candlemaker's Street and down the stairs that lead to an empty stretch of beach. You may meet Naruto-kun there right now. I advise you to not try anything stupid, though. You wouldn't like the results. These words were uttered with absolute conviction, along with coldness that practically dripped ice fern to the floor. He nodded and said his thanks, leaving the girl in the shop that smelled pleasantly of cinnamon and peppermint. It was a pity that she was involved in such shady affairs, he thought. And wondered despite himself what her name was. The girl's advice and the salty sea wind led him to the old red granite stairs and the yellowish-brown beach. It was rather rocky, which was probably the reason tourists hadn't invaded this stretch of sand and seawater yet. Standing on the uppermost stair, he saw a group of people. They were all rather young, though the age varied from the tween to the later 20s. It was a gaggle of women, all in rather simple yukata, forming a wide circle around three figures. There were dark-haired girl and boy dressed in blue, and a boy with bright daffodil yellow hair wearing grab-you-by-the-eyeballs orange jumpsuit. That could only be one person in this whole world. Naruto, what the hell are you doing here? He shouted and ran down the stairs. The mass of people in simple pale blue and dim green opened to let him through, and he found himself face to face with one grinning Uzumaki Naruto. Hey, Idate. It's great to see you. What are you doing here? We are training my fire brigade. Naruto gave him a blinding grin, but the females were closing in on him with flint in their dark eyes. Many were pressing their hands into fists, or spreading their fingers like claws. What it is that you want with Naruto-kun? One of them asked. Idate got the impression that if he gave the wrong answer now, this whole group would try to claw his eyes and probably his heart out as well. What he made out of the explanation, once he managed to calm them down somewhat, was that these people would be a fire brigade, that this place was now completely Yakuza-free, and that Jiraiya the Sannin, had left Naruto alone here for whole 2 months. Something like this could only happen with Naruto. But he could deal with 2 months. Idate had no idea where people had gotten the idea that Naruto was a Yakuza leader, given that the idiot was terminally incapable on harming a caterpillar unless it first committed a murder of one of his friends, but just 2 months in this circus would leave the town and country. That was harmless. We met a little while ago when he helped me. Can I do something for you? He asked from the group as a whole. And if he was thinking of the fierce girl with the chocolate hair in the shop, it was no one's business but his own. 018. Black Week 2 was almost up, and Naruto had decided that he was having way better time than he would have with Uro-sensei anyway. Idate had taught the girl self-defense the last 2 days, and Konatsu-chan and Kaede had taught this simple water jutsu called Suten, Mijirappa, that was a little like Sasuke team's fireball jutsu, except it made you spit water instead. So far Naruto was the only one who had learned it, but the girls were beginners. He was sure it was just a matter of time before they got it. He was sitting outside the house in a folding chair, munching one of the apples left over from that day's experimentation, and thought that he should go meet Ariko and maybe bring him the apple dumpling Tsubaki-chan was making from the carved-out apple flesh. Konatsu-chan was having hand-to-hand practice with Kaede, and they yelled at each other, making great leaps around the yard. The apple was tart and the sun was warm. Of course something had to happen. He saw Konatsu-chan and Kaede dodge before he saw what they dodged. 10 sharp icicles as tall as Naruto's arm was long struck the ground where the 2 young ninja had just stood the moment before, sinking deep into the ground. At their wake, a tall man in blue kimono with a striped undershirt and a mask with blue swirl dropped to the ground. His posture was lazy in a way that reminded Naruto of Kakashi-sensei, shoulders relaxed and posture loose, but there was a sense of danger that just clung to him. But while Konatsu pulled her blade and Kaede shouted for Tsubaki, in Naruto's eyes the picture of the man overlapped momentarily with another figure, a smaller and slimmer one, standing on a tree branch. Haku in Hunter Nin costume. But Haku was dead, and so was Zabuza. You kids got further than I thought possible. But now it's time for you to die. The unknown shinobi's voice was flat and bored as he positioned his hands for making hand signs, but waiting for his opponent's first move. He was mocking Konatsu-chan, Naruto realized, telling her she didn't stand a chance and could just lie down and die now. And if there was something Naruto could be trusted to absolutely, undeniably and forever reliably hate. No, you won't. Your village is a hellhole, they are better off here and you aren't touching them. And who are you to tell other people they suck when you are such a happy evil minion anyway? His fingers moved with practiced ease and the man didn't even have time to speak, if he even intended to speak, before the yard was swamped by 50 shadow clones. They all jumped as one against the man. After that it was tightly contained chaos. The man struck 7 clones down with water bullets, and brief flashes of impact and pain flashed through Naruto's mind, followed by a sliver of black, but he didn't let it stop himself. He got a punch through. The man blocked 3 clones and kicked him, and they were again apart, in a, well, if not sea then at least a good-sized puddle of yellow and orange. Konatsu-chan took the chance to hit the man with the same jutsu she had tried to teach to the girls that very day, but it hit the great oak behind where the hunter nin had just stood. They all darted around each other for a moment as they analyzed each other. This was when 3 apples flew unerring towards the man in the air. He took a mocking step to the side and gave Tsubaki-chan a mocking nod. "The first thing you happen to hold, I presume?" he asked. And Naruto was angry, but he wasn't so angry as to not notice the way Tsubaki-chan's eyebrows went up. It was a sight to see. There was an explosion that broke every window in the house. The ninja had dodged, but he had to pull a short blade midair to meet Tsubaki-chan's. 2 water jutsu flew at him at the same time, but the man dodged them nimbly, landing on his feet. The ground under them had turned to slick mud and Naruto's foot slipped on it. "What was that?" the hunter nin asked, and for the first time he sounded rather rattled. "How you managed to fool me with genjutsu?" "It wasn't genjutsu, it was a cute and quaint custom," Naruto shouted, threw himself forward and made a movement to punch the man in the face, which provoked a reflex of blocking the said punch. But that couldn't sadden him much now. His bombs had been vindicated, so ha. Kaede was the next to strike with his Kadachi, Konatsu-chan right at his heels, and several Naruto clones gave them backup. Black flickered across Naruto's vision as the clones died, but Kaede didn't die, so that was good. Tsubaki-chan engaged the enemy now, and steel met steel, which clangs that echoed right down to the roots of Naruto's teeth. But he wasn't sitting on his ass either. As he finished flicking his fingers, he called out the name of his technique. Kushios no Jutsu. Pouring as much chakra as he could into it, Naruto summoned forth Gameiken, the great magenta toad the same size as Gamabunta, who appeared directly above the hunter nin. He almost got out of the way. "You seem to have a situation here, Naruto. I hope I can be of some modest help," the forever polite Gameiken greeted his summoner, turning his head and apparently trying to figure out what and where the situation was. It was an odd scene. The strong, old oak had snapped under the great toad like a matchstick, and a curvy branch of it had protected the hunter nin from turning into paste. Mud had splashed everywhere, and Naruto was covered in it from head to toe. The tree had luckily fallen not over the house or the geisha house next to it, but towards the road. The Naruto clones were all gone, and he was blinking the jet-colored darkness of death from his eyes. The rest of the wet, dirty fighters had pressed tightly against the house, as the yard was just big enough for the great toad warrior. The hunter nin groaned in pain and defeat. "What are the neighbors thinking about us now, I wonder?" Tsubaki-chan contemplated, and her voice was the only dry thing in close vicinity. 019. White, a giant toad had fallen on top of him. Doihara Taiki, Shrike, could barely believe his own memory, even though he had been stripped down to his underwear and tied tightly up. The loud, blonde boy in Kill Me Orange was apparently Jiraiya of the Sanin student. Konoha had some interest in Mizushima Konatsu and her alleged half-brother, or possibly boyfriend, and he could never tell his superiors what he had learned. Somehow, this didn't make her feel the anguish such thoughts were supposed to. He just felt kind of bored and numb as he wondered if he would be tortured for information here or shipped to Konoha to Morino Aviki's tender care. "Hey, I have a question for you, evil minion-san." When the bright form of his captor trotted to him, Taiki thought his question answered. The smile on the boy's face was much too wide to mean any good, and the way his quarry glowered from the other end of the room surely meant they would love to offer their assistance. Codename Shrike, Jounin, registration Idaho 01554. His voice was clipped, stern. His mask had been taken from him and he felt near naked, but he would never give his name, let alone anything more incriminating. The boy blinked, and if Taiki read his body language correctly, not really, Sato was more bemused than anything. "That's nice? But about my question?" Sato, for lack of better name, continued his original trail of thought. Codename Shrike, Jounin, registration Idaho 01554. He supplied again and took a deep breath, preparing his body for a blow, most likely nothing truly damaging at first. It would begin with beating and sleep deprivation. "Yeah, you told me that, but what I want." Now his intrepid interrogator was beginning to look frustrated. Taiki took that as a small victory. Codename Shrike, Jounin. "Do you like apple dumplings?" Sato shouted over his litany, red-faced. Taiki's tongue froze in his mouth as he tried to wrench his thoughts to the new rails. Apple dumplings? Where did apple dumplings enter the conversation? "And dear Kami, why? They are good enough, I guess," he answered nonchalantly. It was enough to get Sato to grab one from a nearby table and push it into his mouth. It was hot and sweet and he had hard time swallowing it. Sato rambled on about how he had at first offered the dumplings to Gamaken the Toad of Awesome. Taiki could hear the capital letters, but Gamaken had declined and now they had enough for everyone. Silence followed this and he didn't break it first. Why you are Hunter Nin anyway? You don't look evil enough to like it in Kiri. Is that it, you became Hunter so you wouldn't have to spend time in Kiri? Sato speculated and it made Taiki feel unease, and then anger because of the unease. He hadn't ever thought of his career choice in those terms and he wasn't going to start now. Warlike entered the equation. I am Kiri's property, no more and no less, he reassured himself. Like his country was during the winter, colorless and featureless as the snow covered the world, he was snow white and snow cold, with little but his registration ID to tell him apart from 100 others. He had a function to perform and before this unfortunate incident he had performed it without a flaw. He had hunted his every quarry down, even his 2 Jinan teammates, and their red had mixed with the winter white. No one who graduated from Kirigakure Academy could ever be sentimental. So what of it if he sometimes felt like he had died a while ago and just not noticed? Not you too. Just like Haku was, what it is with that place. Sato groaned, though the question wasn't really addressed to anyone. Taiki briefly wondered who Haku was, but didn't ask, and then Sato continued already, you know what, you need some attitude adjustment. This is for your own best. So you insist on being property, fine, then I'm stealing you. What? Just a single word. He couldn't even manage a questioning note to tag to the end of it. 020. Colorless. The beginning of the story was a situation in Iwa and a boy whose parentage really would be better not discovered or even suspected there. But that was only the beginning of one story. The stories of different people are intertwined and branching, before they go their separate ways again, they overlap and share side characters like friends share a bento box. And when one story is just beginning, another has gone on for a good long while. A question: what color is a chameleon in a mirror? Kabuto didn't know the answer, but he was starting to suspect that he had no color left at all, like an old shirt that had been washed too often. He was a loyal shinobi of Konoha. He was also a loyal shinobi of the root, and that was a whole another cup of tea, even though the two weren't mutually exclusive. He was a loyal shinobi of Kumo and Suna and Kiri, except not really, and it was getting so bad that when he got up from the bed every morning he had a moment when he didn't remember who he was supposed to be loyal again. Or who he was supposed to be. Or what the difference between loyal and traitorous had first felt. It was an unnerving sensation, like all his joints were loose and could dislocate any moment, only these joints were all in his head. Something needed to be done. Kabuto received an answer of sorts from an old shinobi in one of Kiri's bars. The man was drunk, which was part of why Kabuto approached him in the first place, all the easier to cast that small piece of genjutsu on him, the one that disturbed the conversion of short-term memories into long-term memories. It wouldn't do for that man to wonder later why he had asked such a question, after all. The other part was that the man had served in Kiri's counterintelligence for years and there was a fair chance that he might say something applicable. In another life this man wouldn't have been alive at all, and Kabuto would have asked someone else and received a different answer. But in this life the gruff man sat there, melancholic and drunk and alive, and he gave Kabuto a look that might have been almost pitying. You are too young to make that kind of career choice, brat. Go play ninja with your Jinan team, he said and sipped his sake. Okay, so I'm too young to do that yet, Kabuto acquiesced with respectful ease. But what would I do, if sometime I was deemed worthy? He kept his body language open and eager to please. Keep your body open, that sounds obscene, Momo had laughed. She was an orphan from the red lights district, but that was of course long before they learned how to not find amusement in anything because amusement was distracting, and his eyes had just the right bit of hero worship and not too much sense. There was a disconnect between the naivety the broadcasted and the kind of question he had asked, but the man was drunk. If you can't trust yourself to remember who you are, pick someone to remember it for you and do whatever they think you would do, the man grunted and shooed him away. Kabuto left, his mind weighting possibilities. No one en route would do. When they could barely remember who they were, how could they form an acceptable baseline for Kabuto? Someone loyal, someone who wasn't damaged goods yet. Someone from the uppermost leafs of Konoha to remind the roots what they were doing the dirty work for. Someone who embodied the idea of Konoha, yet who would be approachable and responsive to his advances. He returned to Konoha not only with the required intelligence, but also an idea. He had figured out an S-class secret on his own. He knew whose son Uzumaki was. 021. Friends. When Naruto became 5 years old he got a new friend. His name was Kabuto and he knew everything about everything, or so it seemed like to starstruck Naruto back then. The first time he met the older boy it was well past the dusk and Naruto was sitting in a swing in the playground near the orphanage. He had overheard some older kids that day when he had snuck out of the orphanage. They had been clan kids, dressed like their dads in wire mesh and ninja pants and dark shirts, only without weapons, and they had argued how their curfew was the most unfair thing ever. It would be so neat if we could just sneak out after it's dark, one of them said. He had wild, mousy-colored hair and a small puppy in his arms. Naruto had once asked for a puppy, but the matron had just laughed at him. Can you imagine? No one would know. That night Naruto snuck out through the window. It was first story so it was easy, and went under the gate to get to the street. It was really easy and he didn't know why the older boys thought it was so difficult. But then, he didn't get what was so fun about playing after dark, except that no one came to push him down from the swing. But then the boy with gray hair came to talk with him and he understood it perfectly. Nighttime was a great time to make new friends. It was the first time when he wanted to play ninja that someone said yes to him. First we must make drop bags, Kabuto told him. What's a drop bag? Naruto asked. He was walking with Kabuto down the street to the part of town Hokage Gigi had told him not to go to, but even though he felt kinda bad for disobeying Hokage Gigi, he went because he didn't want his new friend to think he was a baby. Drop bag is an emergency pack where you keep weapons, clothes and money and you hide it in a secret location so that if something happens and you have to leave the village in a hurry, you don't have to leave empty-handed, Kabuto explained. The way he played ninja was different from the way the other people did it, but that was just cool. The first time Naruto met Kabuto they just played ninja. They played surveillance on a warehouse and had to make notes on anyone who came in or went out. It wasn't anyone interesting, just men who carried a lot of crates, but Kabuto told him to imagine they were secret weapon crates and that was exiting. Naruto couldn't write yet so he just pretended, but Kabuto made real notes. After that they made plans to steal the weapons and blackmail the owner by taking pictures and threatening to send them to T&I. Naruto didn't know what T&I was, but it sounded scary when Kabuto threatened imaginary people with it. He didn't just have to imagine those people either, Kabuto could make them visible. That was called genjutsu and it was a totally kick-ass ninja art. It was a fun night and even though he was really tired the next day it was so worth it. The second time Naruto met Kabuto he was asked a lot of funny questions. Do you know what a chameleon is? Kabuto asked him. He didn't know and Kabuto told him it's a lizard that changes color to whatever it is on. That sounded really ninja-like to Naruto and he said so. True, Kabuto laughed, but it wasn't happy laughter, more like a dog's bark. But what color is a chameleon that's on a mirror? What color am I? Naruto gave this a lot of thought. Kabuto had silver hair and really pale skin, his clothes were blue and in the dark of the night he looked like a shadow and a glitter of moonlight, but Naruto didn't think this was about that. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that this was really important to Kabuto and he had to get the answer right. Friends came through for friends. You are friend-colored, he said and Kabuto smiled to him in a way that looked a lot friendlier. Encouraged, Naruto went on, and you are cool-colored and lots of knowledge-colored too. And Kabuto stood straighter and pushed the glasses up his nose in a way that looked really wise. Naruto saw Kabuto 5 times before he went away in a mission for a year. He saw Kabuto twice after he got partnered with some guy who was a medic nin and taught him to be a medic nin too, but Kabuto had a lot of missions and couldn't spare much time to play with his young friend. After that Naruto saw him for the first time in the Chunin exams and things went to south really fast after that. He had pretty much forgotten the whole drop bag thing, but after trying and failing to retrieve Sasuke he went to check their secret place under the Hokage mountain the moment they let him out of the hospital. His bag was there, but Kabuto's was gone. It didn't hurt quite so much as Sasuke's defection. It didn't hurt quite so much as Haku's death had. It made a close third, though. 022. Enemies Uzumaki Naruto was an idea that worked. He gave Kabuto a lot of colors and while none of them were colors as the word was conventionally interpreted, he was satisfied with them. Friendship, cool, knowledgeable, secrets, fun. He became a lot better at faking sanity as accepted by the norms of the Hidden Leaf after that. Maybe, he thought, just maybe he wasn't wholly faking it when he smiled to a vendor who gave him an extra apple and complimented his friendly manner. He felt warm and free in his action in a way he hadn't for a while, like he didn't have to measure every action before he took one. Friendly colored. Friendly worked, he learned, with a great big number of people and in most situations, and even on a mission, smiling and being polite unnerved his enemy more than his threats ever did so it worked out. Conflicting signals, one of his senpai said. Kabuto was simply happy to have a script he didn't have to deviate from. The last time Kabuto saw Naruto before leaving for Iwa. They played ninja only after the darkness had fallen, to protect Kabuto's face from becoming linked to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He had a feeling Danzo-sama wouldn't like that. This time he employed a small area genjutsu to help them play recruiting for a spy organization. What he used was a real simulation and Naruto, he noted with some amusement, was actually devastatingly good at recruiting, even though he didn't seem to fully realize the way he took advantage of people's raw places. When I'm big, I'm gonna have my own secret ninja organization. And then you can be part of it too. Naruto crowed after the play had ended for the night. Is that so? Kabuto asked, smiling and ruffling his hair. Naruto made a small protest and squirmed his way out from under his hand. Yeah, and you have to promise you will be part of it. It's one of your colors, you know. Always keeps promises to friends' color, Naruto stated imperiously. He seemed to enjoy the right to dictate Kabuto's colors. So I am, then, he affirmed and nodded his head, trying to recall when was the last time he had been asked to give promise. En route he was given a lot of orders, but no promises were expected of him. Promise implied trust and Danzo-sama trusted no one. The last person he had given a promise to had been Nono. How long had it been since he last thought of her? I promise that when you found a secret ninja organization, I will join it. He didn't feel disjointed anymore now that Naruto knew who and what he was for him. That was worth any promise. He was aware it wasn't quite healthy to be so dependent on the perceptions of another, but it was healthier than what he used to be. He even started to dream on Nono again, of her smiles and the smell of freshly baked bread on her hands. In another life he would have called Nono a mother. He wondered at times what had come of her. Yakashi was her surname and she had let him use it as his own. So Yakashi Kabuto went to Iwa and found he had enough of a human heart for it to break. Nono, he could barely believe that of her. Nono was one of Danzo's. But Nono had loved him, she hadn't wanted to give him up. She had tried to buy him free, by taking that one mission. Yakashi Nono was double-crossed, killed by the same son she had tried to free, and what was left of Kabuto's sanity gave spirit at last. For the first time in his life Kabuto had an enemy he shared with no authority. Enemy was a color like the tang of blood on tongue and a not so cold it burned lodged within the heart. Naruto hadn't given him loyalty for Konoha as a color, and so Kabuto wasn't bothering with that loyalty. Orochimaru offered him a chance for revenge and he took it happily. His new master often spoke of his true colors, the snake Sanin, Danzo, Sasori, they all had him, or thought they did, with great amusement, but this was a secret Kabuto kept from him. His color was a friend, Naruto's friend. He truly didn't see being in Naruto's enemy's service mutually exclusive with that friendship. What did enemies and allies matter? But there was something he was as well. He was one who would have to keep a promise he had given to Naruto. Orochimaru, after all, had asked him for none. I promise that when you get a secret ninja organization, I will join it. 023. Lovers. The people of Makimura thought that Naruto-kun was a Yakuza boss, strong as a monster and obviously some kind of evil genius to have taken over in less than a week, albeit his evil was somewhat diminished by his tendency to be polite to women, his fondness of little children, and the way he never actually terrorized anyone who didn't go out of their way to terrorize or arrest his precious people first. This was nothing new, and Tsubaki was beginning to learn this kind of odd situations as something inherently Naruto, the same as taking pity on and taking in potentially dangerous and very desperate Kiri missing nin. Naruto argued 2 out of the 3 didn't really count as missing nin because they hadn't graduated to become ninja in the first place. She was sure Kirigakure didn't care. What was new was that she was due to some inexplicable, communal caprice thought to be Naruto's maul. What is wrong with these people? She asked Kaede-kun, the person with the bad luck to be in her presence when she overheard a man warning his friend from hitting on the Yakuza boss's bird. She ain't worth that. Their delusions about his moral character aside, Naruto-kun is 13, she hissed in annoyance. It was true that in most places, Konoha included, Jinan were considered legally adults, but there were different degrees of legal and it just wasn't. Or if it was somewhere, the legal system of that place was in serious need of revamping. People tend to have kind of lurid imagination. I mean, there were lots of people who whispered I was, us servicing Konatsu in return for her tutoring back in Kiri. Neither of us is 12 this day, and I'm not entirely sure all of them were unaware we are siblings, Kaede-kun commiserated, and Tsubaki had to concede with an inner wince that accusations of underage sibling incest prostitution were about on par with pedophilia. They were walking down the street towards the shop that had become their base of non-existent operations simply because the little safe house couldn't house everyone involved at this point. Now that Tsubaki had become aware of the rumors circulating, she noticed how many people actually nodded to her when she walked past, and she remembered the bargains she had gotten for the food and practically everything she had shopped for in Makimura. None of the nodders, some whom nodded so deep it wasn't a nod anymore, but a bow, were tourists either, she noticed. All were locals. Besides, they think we are Yakuza. I guess high moral standards aren't really expected of us, Kaede whispered and shared a look with Tsubaki that said things. This can be used, it said, we get things cheaper and no one messes with us, and maybe we really could do something illegal if we can speak Naruto into it because money's always good. It was a very pragmatic look, a Kiri look on the face of a boy much too young to be so jaded, but then, that was Kirigakure. Blood on the water and cruel smiles hidden by the mists. To the winner go the spoils, Tsubaki mused and freaked herself out just a little bit. Because while most of her hoped to any deity who might listen that no one in Konoha ever heard of this, another, small, petty part wouldn't have cared about the malignation of her character quite so much if only these rumors could have reached Mizuki, if only he could have come to believe that the one who beat him had gotten his woman. It was only now that she realized to how great extent she wasn't over him and his betrayal yet. The critique of the loan economy is that we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like, but what are we criticizing when the case is that we are ready to have people whose morals we deride to think ours are low as well? She wondered. Kaede made a small sound at the back of his throat and gave her a long look, and Tsubaki realized she had asked it out loud. 024. Family Matsuzaki Ariko was a man who liked his comforts. He was comfortably wealthy and had a well-established business that gave him respectability. He had a nice modern house with all modern comforts Tea Country could offer, no buying ice from the ice vendor to keep his food cold, oh no, and no need to buy coal to keep his house warm. He didn't have kids, but his sister had, as well as grandkids, handy whenever parental mood struck him and he felt like spoiling someone a little rotten. Then there was Sakuya, a widow of an old friend of his, who lived next door to his oldest niece. They had been flirting for a while now, and who knew? The days went past, all similar, all peaceful. Or they used to go in such manner. Now his precious comfort zone had been shattered into 100 little pieces, and the worst part of it was that a pretty big part of the blame lay with him. He should have known better than to allow himself to be drawn into ninja business, but it had gotten him such a good shipping contract. And honestly, nothing of importance ever happened in Tea Country, in Makimura even less. It was a tourist trap with no strategic value, no natural resources, and it was part of no important trade route. If his delicacy trade wasn't the biggest thing going on, it was pretty close. Just yesterday he'd had to explain to his nieces, his nephew and Sakuya, that he wasn't part of any deals with Yakuza, honest, it was just ninja. But they are the nice guys, honest. That hadn't gone well at all. In a way his heart condition and enforced rest was even a blessing, it gave him a good reason to stay home. He didn't want to know what people were speaking of him. And today, just to add insult to injury, Sato Naruto had come to visit him with his posse. There was an older woman, though young still, with brown hair, a vest of some sort and stern eyes. She was keeping a suspicious eye on a man in yellow yukata that seemed a little small on him, like it wasn't his own. A girl in strange ninja-looking blue clothes complemented the picture. So this was Naruto's family, or what passed for one in the ninja world? A squad? Minions? A flock? Hi, Matsuzaki, it's nice to see you are sitting up and stuff. Naruto greeted him. Ariko was sitting on his old, ratty, comfortable armchair in his living room, sipping iced tea. It had been a better day than the previous, but of course nothing that good could last. Naruto pushed a paper bag into his lap, grinning like a loon. There are apple dumplings, we had a lot off applesauce because we made bombs. This is Tsubaki-chan, she's my senpai, and Miwa-chan, she's my assistant in all things, and Shrike, who isn't telling me his real name yet, he was a Kiri hunter nin, but I stole him. He gave the introductions like they were supposed to make sense. Ariko gave what he heard all the contemplation he could bear and pressed his face in his hands. I don't even want to know. 025. Strangers. The following is a transcription of a conversation between Sato Naruto, S, and unknown male 2, U2. The conversation took place in front of Matsuzaki's Better Delicacies shop. Unknown male 2 is approximately 25 years old. Tall, 6 foot and a few inches, with lean build. He has short dark brown hair, long nose and a little rounder jaw than usual of Tea Country's citizens. No visible scars or other distinctive marks. U2, why are you doing this? S, why am I doing what? U2, don't play stupid. Why you care enough to try something this stupid? I'm a complete stranger to you. I was your enemy. S, ha. You said was. Not am. U2, a slip of tongue, why am I even explaining anything? What is your interest in me? S, you know, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. Besides, we have met so we aren't strangers, but friends already. U2, isn't that a decision that requires two people to make? S, remember. Stolen. U2, as though I could forget. Why? That question can't be too much to ask, surely. Why? S, why are you still here instead of, I don't know, baking a file into a cake? I mean, Not like it would be that hard to up and go. You too, it's morbid curiosity, nothing more and nothing less. Whatever works. At least you are, you too, it's not working. You know, Iruka-sensei always said that resorting to raising volume is a sign of losing an argument. Give in to the happy side of life. We have ramen. And apple dumplings. You too, you are the least reasonable individual I have ever had the misfortune of conversing with. At this point and you two entered the shop and I heard no more questions. What has been stolen? You two appears conflicted in regards to working for I'm advising careful contact. He may agree to testify in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Who is Iruka-sensei? More research about backers is in order. Were the capital letters really necessary? You had to be there, boss. The windows rattled. 026. Teammates, it isn't easy to think in straight lines in a world that thinks in circles. Naruto knew that people often thought he was a little simple, but it wasn't that. Things were simple and people insisted on making them a lot more complicated than they were. Take, for example, him and Kyuubi. Naruto wanted to be loved. If he hurt people, he wouldn't be loved, so obviously he wasn't going to hurt anyone who didn't really have it coming. People should think that they didn't want Naruto to hurt them and thus not treat him badly, but so many people failed common sense forever. They were lucky Naruto was the sensible type. Even Iruka-sensei didn't quite get it, though he had come close. Being happy was better than being unhappy, obviously, so Naruto was happy. It wasn't always easy, but hey, the only good thing about easy was that it was easy. Easy wasn't synonym for happy, and it wasn't like his whole life sucked or anything. Just some people in it, and if those people included S-class criminals, hey, neither person nor S-class criminal was a synonym for life. Trying to explain things like this to Shrike was ridiculously complicated, but that was nothing new to Naruto. Straight lines and circles. A wasp zigzagged its way next to Naruto's ear and he waved it off briskly, hopping a little. Shrike gave him a look, but hey, Naruto knew those were really mean-tempered and would sting you just for fun. He had even used some for anti-Uchiha pranks before the massacre, good memories, he now told Shrike. Wasps didn't fly in a straight path, they sort of zigzagged in patterns that kept changing, which made dodging them difficult even for Sharingan users since they were used to dodging straight-line projectiles. And a whole nest of wasps, now that was a proper comeuppance. That guy totally deserved it, he kicked a little civilian girl's puppy when it grabbed his pant leg. And don't look at me like that, it was fun. But then, Naruto had already noticed that Shrike was really bad at enjoying his life. Do you want to be unhappy? He asked. There were, apparently, people who liked being in pain. He had read that one manuscript for Jiraiya when his proofreader had quit, and he had at first thought it was about Anbu, but then it had gotten seriously weird. He really could have gone through life without learning what masochist meant, but at least he now knew what the nut was that got screwed wrong in Sasuke team's brain. Only without the sex part, hopefully, because yuck, I wasn't unhappy, Shrike insisted. Naruto had sneaked them both out of the safe house because he had a feeling Shrike wasn't going to feel comfortable if Tsubaki-chan was glaring at him, and so they were sitting on a bench in a park. It was a pretty place, with almost overgrown paths and a shrine nearby. The trees were looking kind of sad. Naruto thought it might be because of the heat and no rain, but the tall red and yellow and orange flowers were putting up a good fight, and he wondered if anyone would mind if he took a few with him. Tsubaki-chan would be mad later for ditching her, and so would Miwa-chan, but sometimes you had to accept that people were going to get mad at you. It was for a good cause. But you weren't happy either, and isn't not happy a synonym for unhappy? Naruto asked Shrike. Synonym was a surprisingly useful word, it made explaining these things a lot easier. Red rose to the older man's face and it reminded Naruto of Iruka, except not. Iruka flushed red, but he smiled when he did it. Shrike's eyes glittered like pieces of funny-colored flint. Why? You care? His voice was rising to a shrill falsetto now, almost unmanly, but something of it really reminded Naruto of Kakashi-sensei's voice when he told his sensei about Sasuke and the Chidori, and it sent something cold up and down his spine. But if there was one thing Naruto wasn't, that was a coward. Look, it's not like I just grabbed you because you can't get something for nothing, and I wanted you to not be so screwed up, so I had to give something in exchange. We are teammates now, Naruto said, and because he just knew that Shrike was going to be difficult, he continued, I have a group of people who work with me, so I have a team. I stole you, so you are now part of the team, and that makes us teammates, so deal with it. I'm not gonna stop sheltering you, and if you want to join the fire brigade or do something else, like, take up interpretative dance or something, I'm gonna support you, and that's non-negotiable. There was silence at first, and only wind rustled in the trees. It smelled like the sea, wet like Kiri jutsu and really, really free. My name is Doihara Taiki. A straight line trumps a circle. Every time. 027. Parents, it was yet another perfectly beautiful day in the perfectly wonderful beach resort town Makimura. The sky was blue and the sea was even bluer, the birds were singing their tiny hearts off and the golden beaches were filled with beautiful, and some not so beautiful, but no one counted that, women in tiny swimsuits. There were about 200 Narutos in the city at the moment, doing this and that in the two huge ex-bordellos to change them into actual inns. The casino boat had been good for use as it was, but the interior decoration of a Yakuza cat house left a lot to be desired. Tsubaki wasn't out practicing with the fire brigade, though she would have liked to be, for water jutsu had never been her strongest suit and some of the things Taiki-san knew were just plain wicked. She wasn't with Naruto either, though she liked to keep an eye on him and guard him from harm. Ono Tsubaki was busy writing a report. Naruto was only answerable to Jiraiya for now, but she still had to contact Konoha and there lay a problem. She was pretty sure Konoha wouldn't approve of what was going on in Makimura. She munched on a sweet cinnamon apple dumpling while she eyed the intimidatingly white paper. It was ironic, but while Naruto's favorite food for all times was ramen and there was indeed more instant ramen in the house than Tsubaki would have thought necessary to last out a month-long siege, he had gotten his friends/comrades/followers completely addicted on apple dumpling. He was surprisingly proficient baker in addition to the number one most surprising ninja. I would love to say this makes more sense in context, she thought, but on reflection it didn't. It was just Naruto all the way. Tsubaki was certain that Naruto wasn't doing anything that was explicitly forbidden, if only because no one ever thought it necessary to forbid making legal business, founding a fire brigade, fighting Yakuza or talking foreign shinobi into defecting, and certainly his current commanding officer hadn't done so. It was only in Naruto's tender care that this became a rather epic case of implicitly forbidden. And Tsubaki wanted to see this through. It was. Maybe she felt a bit maternal. Naruto had no parents and no one knew who they had been, though the logical assumption was that they had died when the Kyuubi had attacked Konoha. If Naruto had a father figure that would be Iruka, and if not for the strange, she didn't know how to best describe it except maybe by calling fealty. The best way to describe what Tsubaki felt, some people's sick assumptions aside, would be a proud mother watching her son make name for himself. She wondered idly if Iruka had done this on purpose, and when she snapped herself out of her musings she found she had drabbled flowers and indeterminable geometric shapes all over the paper. She replaced it with a sigh. She couldn't outright lie, of course, that would be discovered. Even omissions would be bad news for her. But maybe she could not omit things in a way that made them look more regular than they actually were. I have assisted Uzumaki Naruto in taking care of the business he took control of after Matsuzaki Eriko, look Jiraiya-sama's contacts, T-Country for further reference, was forced to take sick leave after he suffered a heart attack and was ordered rest. Uzumaki-san has also made an effort to benefit the local community by helping to establish by taking action to establish a fire brigade. That was good. That was public-minded and respectable and in no way implicated breaking cover, even though that was what had actually happened. Morino, a date was easy. A member of the Wasabi family, Ibiki himself would help her cover that one. The Mist trio became immigrants from the water country. There was her report, all technically speaking accurate and intentionally misleading. This wouldn't fly if not for Jiraiya-sama, of course, not in 100 years. But Jiraiya-sama wouldn't want troubles for Naruto, and so he would have to keep her out of trouble as well. "We are heavy, aren't we?" she asked from the empty room. "You have to take responsibility of a lot of people with a lot of baggage. But it's weight you carry well. I don't think your dream of becoming a Hokage is so far-fetched as many think." She could see him standing there in front of him, in that silly orange jumpsuit, flushing a little and scratching his head in a bashful manner, grinning like the sun. Was she a mother figure or a loyal follower at this point? A friend like Naruto would prefer to see it, or something else entirely? In a complicated world sometimes the simplest things were the hardest to describe. She didn't feel entirely easy, not easy at all, in fact, doing this, but at least she could honestly tell herself that she was no traitor. And sometimes it was better to break the rules than not break them. Mizuki had never given her a child and she didn't know if she would ever have any. But in a way the winner had taken the spoils. Tsubaki was kind of like mother, and it was all thanks to the one who had beaten Mizuki. It was a shock to her, the way some tight, painful no relaxed in her chest and how free and good it made her feel. 028. Children Naruto didn't really notice the wary looks he received from the Makimura citizens because he was so used to be looked at funnily. Familiarity may breed contempt, yes, but contempt also breeds familiarity, and mostly he didn't bother to wonder what he had done now to deserve it when a mother with a baby crossed the street when he walked towards her on his way home. The Makimura adults readily acted accordingly to his expectations. But much to the horror of their long-suffering parents, Naruto had gained a small following of children who thought he was the coolest thing ever. It started with the little girl in yellow yukata whose cat he saved after it had climbed up a torii. The girl played a lot in the park and of course she had told her friends of the nice Nii-san. Being called Nii-san made Naruto feel kind of old, but when little Risa-chan was upset that her friends called her a lying liar, hem on fire, he climbed up a tree for the lot to prove he could. Then there was a little boy that one of the girls took pity on, little Hiro-kun from the poor side of the town who ran outside without shoes and who was much too thin. Mariko-chan started feeding him and she asked Naruto if Hiro-kun could run some simple errands for the constructors. After that Hiro told the rest of the kids he saw following Naruto around where to find him, and before he could say frog Naruto was up to his eyebrows in little kids. He didn't mind it, just made some clones and had them play ninja with his little fans. The adult, now, they were on red hot pins and needles. They told their children that Sato was a bad man and they should stay away from him, but only the most obedient few actually did. Naruto Nii obviously wasn't a man, so why did they go calling him so? And he wasn't bad because he played with them even though he was one of the big kids, he could be a team of his own and he smiled all the time and never shouted at them, so obviously their parents were wrong. Naruto was thought to be a Yakuza leader before his first week in Makimura was over. He only started to wise up to the fact that something funny was going on day 15 when a new kid joined the group. Sato Atsushimiru, that poor boy, what had his parents been thinking? Just so happened to share the surname with his alter ego, the most common surname in tea country. He was tiny and had a gap where one of his milk teeth had fallen off, his smile was devastatingly cute and he tried to bite Naruto when he said so. Naruto liked him immediately. It wasn't the real Naruto, but one of his clones, and they were in a park when a young, harried-looking man in a police's uniform ran to them. Atsushimiru, please come here. We need to go home, he pleaded with his son and extended his hand, walking towards them so slowly now, as if to not startle some wild beast. So you are Maru-kun's father? I'm Sato Naruto, it's nice to meet you. He grinned and extended his hand. But his grin dropped when he realized that the man's face was gray and sickly, and even his lips had lost all color. 029. Birth. While Naruto was getting confused and suspicious, Naruto was busy trying to avoid getting glue in his hair while he was changing the wallpapers in the ex-whorehouse, with the help of himself, the girls, Miwa-chan and Adate. How are the girls' lessons going? He asked Adate. He had asked his friends to give his fire brigade some taijutsu training to enlarge their chakra stores to make learning jutsu easier. After that the other girls had gotten into it as well because life could be dangerous in a big place like Makimura and self-defense was always good. He couldn't stay here forever to protect them, but he and Adate could teach them to protect themselves. The girls would probably get to Jinan level at most even if they practiced dedicatedly even after he left, but that was plenty enough against normal muggers and creeps. They are very motivated, Adate answered and looked up from where he was kneeling under the window. He was making doubly sure the boring neural brown and white rolls color matched by unrolling a length of each and checking them against the others in good light. We do our best, of course, one of the girls shouted from the ladder. They were in the lobby, the biggest room in the whole house. There wasn't much light because the windows were small and she was hanging a new lamp from the ceiling. We are going to make you so proud of us, another one, Yuriko-chan was her name, promised with low, lilting voice as she walked past him. She was carrying a bucket of glue and wearing an ugly gray apron, but she smiled like the sun and when she touched his hand, Naruto blushed a little bit. Anything for you, Naruto-kun. The girls really liked to tease him, it was kind of embarrassing, but at least Uro-sensei wasn't there to rib him to death over it. I think we should have a small party once this work is done, Naruto-kun. To celebrate your new enterprise, Miwa-chan said. Her voice was happy, but she was glaring kunai after Yuriko-chan. That would be great, Adate said faithfully and handed Miwa-chan a new roll. We could shop for supplies together, I haven't seen that much of Makimura yet. This enterprise was worth a party, hell yes. It was named the Sato Corporation because he wasn't supposed to tell anyone his real name, but Naruto knew it was named after him. First a bridge and now a corporation, he knew that this was the birth of a great legend. He just had that feeling, like a storm gathering in the horizon, and Naruto had never been afraid of storms. He wouldn't admit to a foxy grin, but it had a lot of teeth. 030. Death. Doihara Taiki was plotting treason. As a Kiri hunter nin he knew precisely how difficult it could be to escape from the village. From the moment on you walked through the doors of the Kirigakura Ninja Academy the village owned you, body and soul, and you only got out in a body bag. Now, Mizushima Konatsu and her brother weren't such trouble. They weren't even truly graduated, they weren't worth much investigation. He could simply write home and tell there were now 2 nameless graves in Tea Country and that would be the end of it. He himself was a different case. It was a game of wait. He had to play time until Sannin Jiraiya returned and he could defect properly to Naruto's superior officer and be entered in Konoha's registry on probation. After that he would cease to be Kiri's internal problem and become lumped in with the greater problem called Konoha. It would make him not safe, precisely, but safer. If he was lucky he would manage to squirm his way into that comfortable niche where he wasn't worth the trouble trying to get to him would be. He was a hunter nin, but he hadn't made name for himself. The world at large wouldn't know or care that Doihara Taiki was no longer a shinobi of Kiri. His former village wouldn't lose face. But before he could get to that, he still had a little less than 50 days to last, which meant he needed an excuse to remain in Makimura. "What are you doing?" Tsubaki asked, walking behind him. Taiki wasn't entirely at ease with his back turned to someone who regarded him with such suspicion, but it couldn't be helped, and in this strange little commune and its unofficial hierarchy the Konoha Jounin outranked him. Trying to come up with a good lie, he answered honestly, staring at the white paper in front of him. They were in the safe house and tried to spend their time waiting for Naruto to return from the building under reconstruction. Well, he was waiting and Tsubaki was keeping an eye on him, the only one beside Naruto who had a chance against him in a single combat. "I see," Tsubaki sighed and sat back down. Taiki had a feeling she really did. He could be investigating something that had potential to be a threat to Kiri, but not so big a threat he would be sent back up. Something that required time to properly investigate, something that had some relevance to Kiri even from T country. Maybe a cult would do the trick? Something to do with the Jinchuriki. Now that he'd gotten an inspiration the plan came together with ease. The cult preached world peace and universal love, so it wasn't an immediate threat, but the word Jinchuriki always rated vigilance. The cult leader taught that the Jinchuriki were in fact living saints who protected the world from the Bijou and would one day lead the elemental countries to an era of peace and prosperity. A statement which was laughable to anyone who knew anything about the Mizukage, who knew how the other villages used their living cages as living weapons, but what could you expect from a backwater nut job guru? And he simply required a few weeks to properly infiltrate the cult to ensure it truly was as harmless as it sounded. His pen danced across the paper. Now Konatsu and Kaede were dead and he had joined a cult. All in a good day's work. 031. Sunrise Jiraiya was sitting cross-legged in a small, dirty inn room, drinking sake and wondering how his errant student was doing. He knew that Umino Iruka wouldn't have graduated a complete dunderhead and that T country was as safe a place as they came outside Konoha's walls, but this was Naruto. He had long since come to the conclusion that Naruto's good luck at gambling was some karmic recompense for his abysmal luck in life. If there was an accident, incident, attack or catastrophe happening within 5 miles of Naruto, he could be counted on to get caught in the crossfire. This theory didn't explain how Tsunade Heim could be so unlucky, but he was convinced that karma just was a bitch who had it in for the Sannin. Jiraiya hadn't been there for Naruto when he was a kid. Partly this was because he had been honestly dreadfully busy, but partly because watching someone who was so much like Minato and Kushina at the same time had been painful, and he had a lot of experience in running from pain. When he had accepted Naruto as a student he had intended to make up for his past neglect and care for his friend's son, and of course Iwa of all places had to start acting up. Iwagakure wasn't precisely at the peak of their power now either, having yet to fully recover their strength from the losses of the last war, which was the only reason they hadn't attacked Konoha yet, after the Chunin exam invasion. That kerfuffle had sent very mixed signals to the hidden villages. On one hand, if a village was strong enough that an invasion of 2 villages, and one of them a member of the Big Five, could be crushed in an afternoon, that village was obviously strong. On the other hand, a village that had lost its cage had to be weakened. It had taken him a few weeks to find out that there was a lot of plausible deniability going on in Iwa right now. That Tsuchikage wasn't officially aware of the plans of some of his elite jounin at all, and if things fell through he could declare them missing nin and call it a day. Ah, politics. That was one mistress that liked her whips, chains, blindfolds and gags. Maybe a new icha about a few Iwa jounin who bore completely coincidental resemblance to certain Iwa high-ups and a busty, kinky noblewoman dominatrix. That stuff always sent the Tsuchikage up a wall. The second best part about writing porn was all the barely veiled insults you could throw. With plausible deniability, of course. This particular situation was about unnamed Iwa personage contacting a missing nin for a job. Completely unremarkable, unless you suspected said missing nin of being part of Akatsuki. Jiraiya was fairly certain that Iwa wasn't up to date with that, but this didn't make the situation any better. Akatsuki, Red Dawn, the bane of his and more importantly Naruto's existence. "Here's to you, Naruto." "Wait some more weeks yet," he said and toasted to the empty room. The sunrise wormed its way in through the tiny window and painted golden red patches on the off-white walls. He was just drunk enough that it felt very symbolic and meaningful. Now if only his faithful network would bring back some news from Makimura, but Matsuzaki had been suspiciously quiet. Oh, well, no news was good news, surely? To hell with optimism, maybe he should write Tsunade and ask for a report. 032. Sunset that same day Mizushima Konatsu celebrated being dead with her brother. The sun had set on their old life and new was still hiding behind the horizon. The private party included a huge bowl of takeout ramen, courtesy of their new boss who was completely addicted to the stuff, apple dumplings courtesy of Miwa, and a fresh batch of apple bombs in her scroll, these set to explode on impact, and tea with just a touch of sake, courtesy of Tsubaki-senpai and herself. In Kiri, when you were old enough to kill for the village, you were old enough to drink, and if you drank enough to kill your liver or to get yourself killed in a prompter manner, you were obviously too dumb to live anyway. Alcohol-assisted gene pool cleansing. Konatsu wasn't that stupid. She had added to sake directly to the boiling water and boiling destroyed alcohol, only leaving the fang of the taste behind. Her liver was going to remain completely virginal until she hit 16 and so was her brother's if he didn't want his head bashed in. It was a matter of luxury to her, to be able to afford to basically throw away alcohol that comforted her. Are we going to stay here, Natsu? Kaede asked and leaned back against his arm, watching the sun set behind the roofs in a fiery red and amber ball rather than her. The house didn't have much in the way of a porch, but it was a good place to sit on all the same. The ground still hadn't recovered from the beating it had received when Naruto had taken on Taiki and Konatsu felt her mouth twitching at the memory. For now at least. This isn't a bad place to regroup, she promised breezily. They had gotten out with their lives. She still had a hard time believing it had been this easy, but they were in a peaceful, uninteresting country, under the wing of a very powerful, if somewhat special, young shinobi who was a student of one of the Sanin. They had a job that would pay for lodgings of their own in a few months' time and they were officially dead. Really, it could only be better if they could somehow safely rub this to their father's face, but alive was better than petty satisfaction. That's good. I like it here, and some of those girls show real promise, Kaede said and sipped his tea. It was true that they weren't all horrible and in time they would be pretty decent fighters for civilians. Being a fire brigade intendant wasn't what she intended to do her whole life, but she would keep practicing with Taiki and whip those girls up to shape and see then what she wanted to do with her life. Who knew, maybe in a few years' time Naruto would have some real combat work for her to do. And maybe he would be up for fling when they were older. Konatsu wasn't infatuated like some of his rescuees, but he obviously had good genes and their baby would be kick-ass. She was going to say something nice and inane when a voice that rattled the newly fixed windows sounded from the house behind their backs. What you mean, they think I'm a Yakuza boss. Oh dear. Somebody clued him in, Kaede laughed. He hadn't been too keen to tell Naruto what people really thought of him and neither had Konatsu, if only because watching the misunderstandings breed new, fascinating misunderstandings had been so much fun. So do you think we should tell him he's a cult leader too? She asked. The conversation inside was going on at lower volume now and they couldn't quite make out the words through the closed door. Maybe we should leave that to another day? Kaede proposed and toasted her. The tea was only lukewarm now, but something still warmed in her stomach. It was a nice, temperate night and she was feeling very mellow. I will make friends with them and show them I'm not a criminal. This is a promise, Naruto declared, now clearly heard through the door. Konatsu almost snorted the rest of her tea up her nose at the thought of how that would go down and Kaede honestly giggled. How about we make a bet, Natsu? He proposed. How many people will beg for their lives before Naruto is through befriending them? She watched Kaede smile, Kaede laugh, Kaede live. Kaede, who had been bullied for his unisex name up to the point when he stabbed one of the bullies with his practice kunai, Kaede who had the will to live, but not the skills to fight her. Her brother would live, now. Just for that she would have 2 kick-ass babies and give one to Naruto. 033. Too much. Yamamoto Takumo was a frustrated man when he returned home after yet one more day of futile attempts to find something they could arrest Sato Naruto over. After the initial bloodbath had ceased there had been rather annoying lack of obvious lawbreaking. Oh, he didn't suspect for a second that Sato did engage in drug dealing, money laundering and extortion. Though for some reason he appeared to have very dim view on prostitution. It was truly obvious that he had ninja background, for never before had it been this difficult to find even the least credible clues of organized crime going on. A part of him was even happy it was so difficult, at least for now he didn't have to wonder how they could arrest the boy man. Being so pathetically happy about this didn't make him happy at all. That bad today? Reiko asked, peeking through the kitchen door. She was wearing a pink apron with print that read "Kiss the Cook." So he did and immediately felt a little better. It's good to be home, dear. Where's Ruka-chan? he asked and allowed his shoulders to relax. Wonderful scent of fish and ginger wafted from the kitchen. She's sleeping in her cradle, finally. She's been very restless today, I think she may be teething, Reiko answered and gestured him to sit down. It was a wonderful scene, domestic, comfortable, intimate. Of course it was too good to last. There was a firm knock on the door, and when Takumo opened, the polite greeting words turned to ashes on his mouth as he beheld the cheery visage of one Sato Naruto with basket in hand. Sato-san, he stammered, his thought turning to his wife and his little girl, too young to even understand what kind of danger her father had put her in. How foolish he had been. Just because old Seihara had never attempted to have him killed didn't mean a shinobi would think such an action more trouble than it was worth. Hi, I'm Sato Naruto and you are Yamamoto Takumo, right? It's nice to meet you, can I come inside? Sato was all sunshine and smile as he slipped by Takumo, without bothering to wait for permission. There were two people at his back, a girl and a boy approximately the same age. Both of them were so small, but they carried blades openly, and walked with the deadly grace of a really big cat. And you are Yamamoto-san's wife, right? Here, this is for you. Sato presented the basket to his lovely, brave wife. Reiko's face was pale, but her mouth was a determined line as she accepted the gift. There was a bottle in the basket and a small paper package, probably full of some dry goods. Reiko thanked him with a voice that only trembled a little, and Naruto turned back to face him. So, I found out you have these really funny ideas about me. He started and Takumo broke there and then. Please don't. There are plenty of crimes to busy myself with in a town the size of Makimura. Please leave my family in peace. He had never begged for mercy in his whole life, but never before had his family been threatened. If only it was just him, then he could spit at the shinobi Yakuza's face and at least go down with his honor intact. The hate he felt for himself over what he had just offered burned in his stomach like raw alcohol, but even he had his price. The thought of his family dead or worse, and he knew that any Yakuza worth his first Ryo could come up with ever so worse, was just too much for him to bear. I didn't mean it like that. Sato protested and his face twisted into a very convincing facsimile of hurt, and the unnamed girl whispered something to the boy that sounded like first time. That didn't sound promising at all. I'm going to befriend you. Oh 3-4. Not enough at first. Naruto was at a loss as to how he would convince the chief of police of his innocence. Exactly. Usually showing people you were strong enough to kick their ass at least got them to listen, but he couldn't very well fight a civilian. That just wouldn't be sporting. It would be like Neji beating up Hinata-chan. After doing something like that he would need the corrective kick to the behind. In Konoha, asking someone to train with you was what you did when you wanted to make friends, at least for the ninja. Naruto was pretty hazy on how the civilians did it, as he'd never had a civilian friend before he started taking C-rank mission outside the village, and their befriending people mostly involved defending them. He had never gone to a movie before. Kakashi-sensei ordered his team to watch the Princess Fuin movie just before their totally awesome mission where he got to save his first princess, and friendly activity to him was a training spar. Eating together was friendly, he did it with Iruka-sensei, but he wasn't in the habit of going to cafes or restaurants. No one could outright refuse to accept him in, but the service was usually cold enough to frost over his eyebrows. Friendship and martial arts were practically the same thing in Naruto's life. Eventually he had just decided to soften things a bit, tone them down. You know, I'm training a fire brigade, right? Well, the Great Naruto Fire Brigade hereby challenges the Makimura Police Department to a sports day. We will have all kinds of competition, like hitting the bullseye and swimming in races, and I'm not even letting a date compete in that because it would be unfair. It will be fun. And friendly. Yamamoto and his wife were staring at him. Their eyes bugged, their mouth hung open just a little. Naruto was used to funny looks, but these were the sort of funny he had gotten from Kiba when he once proposed they should glue the practice kunai to the ceiling back in the academy, like what he just proposed was just plain too silly for words. He frowned and wondered what it could be. Maybe Yamamoto thought that girls competing against his police was foolishness? A small storm cloud begun to gather over his head as Naruto considered that possibility. If it was so, then he would ask Tsubaki-chan and Konatsu-chan to take part as well and kick everybody's asses, just out of principle. This was something everybody learned at young age in hidden villages. Being told you fought like a girl was no insult, and the girls were ready to prove it. Anytime. Being told you fought like a fangirl was a different thing entirely, but even that one insulted non-fangirls much more than it insulted boys. Is this some kind of gender prejudice thing? He asked. Because there is nothing wrong being a female. Half of humanity is female. Your wife is a female. You don't want to insult her, do you? Yamamoto looked suitably panicked at this thought, though he was still gaping. His wife, whose name he hadn't heard yet, had closed her mouth and tilted her head a little. She looked at him really hard, like she was trying to see through him like a hyuga. It was kind of unnerving, and Naruto rubbed the back of his head, grinning sheepishly. So, it appeared that convincing the police that he wasn't a criminal wasn't enough, he also had to convince them that girls weren't weak. Well, his girls were up to the task, and Yamamoto's wife would probably make him sleep on the couch as punishment for his chauvinism anyway. The thought left him feeling that warm satisfaction he got after a job well done, especially if Iruka-sensei or Kakashi-sensei, or even Uro-sensei, for that matter, praised him. He was going to make the world, or at least Makimura, a better place to live one idiot at a time. 040. Sixth sense. Some things can't be quantified, Yakashi Nono once told her surrogate son. Cut a human down to the atomic level and you still won't find love or loyalty or soul. Some things can only be sensed. Sometimes even ninja have to make do with ordinary postal services. Doihara Taiki didn't have a summon contract or any sort of ninja animals, so his letter traveled 2 days over the waves in a postal ship. Its destination was a small port town named Hakusuicho, because, so the old tale said, there the wind blew the water white. In Hakusuicho, a Kiri agent who went by the name Akira sent on the heavily encrypted report. Unknown to his village, though, the lowly Chunin who felt himself underpaid and undervalued was also part of certain infamous Sound Leaders information network and diligently copied every word. He couldn't break the signet, but he had a simple tool that consisted of 2 sheets of glass and a bright lamp under them. He slid the envelope between the layers and turned the lamp on, reading the letter through the paper. It wasn't easy, as the paper had been folded and the kanji overlapped, but he managed with the aplomb of long practice. As the report hadn't been stamped as either busy, classified or for eyes only, it waited 2 more days in the small Hakusuicho outpost for the round of a courier nin. The original and the copy both reached their destination 7 days after they had been sent, one in Kiri's mission office and the other on the table of Otogakure's head of intelligence, one Yakashi Kabuto. When the Mizushima family hosted a small, sedate gathering to celebrate that the honor of their family had been redeemed through very final means, Kabuto knocked on the door to one of Orochimaru's laboratories. He had picked this moment on purpose. Orochimaru was always distracted when the statistical analysis of the use of different recombinant viruses for gene transfer. "What is it, Kabuto?" Orochimaru asked with an impatient voice from behind the closed door. Kabuto opened it and stepped inside. The laboratory was blindingly white and blindingly brightly lit. Jars greeted him with a colorful glow as the light reflected off green and amber liquids inside. They held organs, hearts, lungs, eyeballs, brains. But today the room was dominated by color-coded files full of raw data from the current experiment and the statistics from several previous ones. Orochimaru graced him with a stern look as he flipped through a couple of different pages on several ledger sheets and 2 different ledger books spread over a side table. "Orochimaru-sama, I have received an intelligence report that I believe demands my presence in T country," he intoned smoothly and bowed his head respectively. Orochimaru's modus operandi was to find the downtrodden and the abused, the diamonds in the rough, and then claim their absolute loyalty for himself. Their only worth in their own eyes was that which they could give to their Orochimaru-sama, but nothing comes for free. The cost of this tactics was that cynical, naturally suspicious Orochimaru had become highly complacent in his faith in his followers' loyalty. Oh, the irony. "Do as you feel you must," Orochimaru snapped in clear dismissal and turned back to his papers. Kabuto didn't smile even behind his back. Ordinarily it wouldn't be quite this easy, but right now a bomb going off in the corridor would be only an annoyance to the Shodai Motokage. Kabuto felt a strange sort of fulfillment that he thought he would rather like to explore some more. Granted, the report mentioned Sato Naruto, but Kabuto had developed a good eye for details and even better intuition over the years. A Jinchuriki cult and Naruto in the same sentence were too big of a coincidence. It was like some benign spirit had whispered to his ear, like he was a Yumemi, a dream gazer, whose dreams whispered of true things. He was completely, absolutely certain that Naruto was recalling him at long last. "Maybe I should take the Uchiha with me," he proposed. He has been demanding lately. And demanding was the last thing Orochimaru wanted now. He pushed his glasses up his nose, allowing the glint of light on glass to hide the tiniest hint of glint in his eyes. This was the greatest proof Orochimaru was taking him for granted. The snake Sanin didn't even hesitate.